Community Representation Initiative for Red Hill. We're going to start this evening with an Oli. If we can just take a minute.
Center ourselves about why we're here and the importance of water as a source of life. Ola I kaha, ola I kawai, ola I kai, Hawaii, Hawaii. Ola I kaha, ola I kawai, ola I kai, Hawaii, Hawaii, Hawaii. Ola I kaha, ola I kawai, ola I kai, Hawaii, Hawaii, Hawaii. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. We'll start with, now we'll move to introductions. I'm Marty Townsend. I am an at-large member, and I'm the chair of this Bad News Bears of Community Outreach.
I'm Lacey Quintero. I'm the vice chair of the CRI, and I represent the impacted community.
I'm Walter Chun. I'm a CRI representative for the public.
Aloha, I am Helani Sonoda Pale, and I'm a representative for Kanaka Maoli.
Susan Gorman Chang. I'm a representative of the community.
My name is Tara Sutton, and I'm serving as an alternate for Melody, representing the community.
And we can go to those on Zoom. Could start with Ilima.
Aloha, Ilima, community advice. Sorry. Aloha, Mandy Pine.
Okay, thank you. So that's Ilima DaCosta and Amy Fight. And then David Kimofranco will be joining us soon, as will Malia Marquez, due to the rain. Everybody who's watching from home, it's pouring down rain. Thank you very much. So just to give a little bit of context so that we, all on the same page. So, we should introduce, sorry, please.
Hi, Kathy Ho, Deputy Director of Environmental Health with the Department of Health.
Good evening. Joanna Cito, Environmental Management Division Administrator.
And as you can see, the Navy and the EPA are not joining us again tonight. And it's not that they're not here. They are here. They are here for several days. But they are choosing not to meet with us because they are... why are they not here? Because they chose not to be here. They want to mediate. So they did have an open house last night, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that there was this outreach effort made by them. It was, they tried hard. They had all displays of all kinds, things that you could play with. It was like Science Fair Plus, so good job. But it was also really kind of a photo op. That was probably the thing that bugged me the most, was the amount of effort made to take pictures of me. It demonstrated to me that the Navy really does want complete control, right? There was a lot of canned videos that played over and over again, and I found that when you interacted with the experts at each of the science fair displays, start to drill down. There's just they had some information, and I do see that they are trying, but there was also is a lot of contractors. It was people not from here, so they didn't know the place names, didn't know the lay of the land, and we'll get into the specifics of our reflections and thoughts on the open house as we go through the agenda items. Tonight, we're going to start off with a discussion on PFAS. We have an expert with us from the Natural Resources Defense Council named Sonia.
And Kimo's online.
And thanks. And then then we'll have be able to have conversations. Sonia's unable to stay with us; she's calling in from the continent. So we'll take any questions you have about PFAS after her conversation. And also, if you have any questions for the Department of Health on PFAS, Kathy and Joanne are here. And then we'll go into groundwater monitoring and the extended drinking water monitoring plans and air quality monitoring. And then time permitting, we'll get into, as well as the releases into Halava Stream and how the Navy's reducing the amount that they are pumping and dumping. And then time allow, we'll get into the old business and follow up in terms of how we're supporting families that are still struggling with contaminated water. And then public comment will start at 7. Hopefully. And I know that I am not good at managing time. Everyone knows that. So we're going to try our best. Any other opening comments anybody wants to make?
I do want to say that the Oahu Water Protectors did a poll online asking the community if they felt it was disrespectful that the Department of Defense and the Navy specifically and the EPA wasn't planning to attend another meeting with the Community Representation Initiative. And I think about 96% of the responses came back yes. The community the majority of the community felt that it was disrespectful to the residents here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so with that, I would like to introduce Sonia Lunder. I met Sonia Lunder at the Sierra Club. She has been working on PFAS issues for many, many, many years. She is now the Director of Community Science at Natural Resources Defense Council. Sonia, can you, we should have tested your sound first, sorry.
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect, very good, thank you.
Okay, great. And we can keep getting ready. I'll just start. So here tonight, an honor to be. It's the second time I've spoken.
It's breaking up.
Hey, Marty, really quick, I don't mean to cut you off. Can we mute Alelo? There's a lot of feedback.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I've muted them for now. Just let me know when to unmute you guys.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Fantastic. There was an echo. It was going to be distracting. I'm Sonia.
Wait,
I work for
now
NRDC.
we can't hear Sonia at all.
I was previously working with Sierra Club. It's a great honor to be with you tonight. I'm going to speak briefly. It's 9 p.m. where I am in Colorado, and I won't be able to stay much past the hour, but I think it's very important to give some clarity about the PFAS that has been detected. I received this week from organizers information about new PFAS detected in the drinking water and thought I would be helpful to come and speak a little bit about these toxic chemicals. So when the slides are queued up, let me know, but otherwise I'll just talk through them. There has been a lot of concern in the EPA and within the Department of Defense, actually, about PFAS contamination. These are high temperature firefighting chemicals. You can move to the next slide, that were engineered to put out fires, on an air tanker or, heaven forbid, in a fuel line or something very essential. They've also been found to be incredibly persistent in the environment and very toxic to people. Drinking small amounts of PFAS in water or eating it in food can increase a person's risk of cancer, of organ damage, problems with pregnancy, and long-term problems with the immune system. And for this reason, EPA has very recently put very strict drinking water standards in place for 6 PFAS chemicals in water. And that's going to cause a lot of chaos and a lot of expense and a lot of water treatment to be taking place throughout the United States, including places in Hawaii. This is just for 6 of thousands of chemicals that have been detected, and the regulatory system is just kind of slowly catching up to be able to measure and study the effects of other chemicals that have been used. And the chemicals have been used both by the military for firefighting, but also to make rain gear, to make popcorn bags. They're put on dental floss. It's a very crazy situation to try to explain how these chemicals that are put on dental floss so it glides better between your teeth are actually, persisting in our bodies threatening our health and accumulating in the environment, including sometimes, in polar bears or in distant places where far from where they were originally used. So today we're here in some way, there will be some conversation about some new tests. So on the next slide, there's just a map of the situation in the Red Hill fuel storage facility where PFAS chemicals were spilled onto the ground. They were there to put out any kind of fires that were in place, and address fuel risk. But their spill and the cleanup and the incomplete cleanup has created a concern that the legacy of spills and incomplete cleanup in that site has burdened the soil, and that PFAS, those chemicals could migrate. They get washed through the water into the shaft, but also into the aquifers and through into rivers. They don't stay put when they're put in the ground. And there's been a lot of attention to spills and cleanup at the Red Hill site. But also new information is showing that there is some detected in drinking water in several places around Hawaii, and I'll walk through that a little bit. The next slide actually is here to remind you that the amounts of PFAS that are being measured in people's bodies and in the water that is linked to problems with our health is incredibly low. Any detectable amount of these PFAS is problematic. And for example, the kind of quote unquote safe level for some chemicals is in the parts per quadrillion range. And a quadrillion is 1,000,000 billion. So if you need to wrap your head around an incredibly large number or incredibly small number, that is just here to remind us that unlike other chemicals, which may be measured in a percent, which is a part per 100, these are just tiny drops, but that they can be linked to problems with our bodies that are long lasting in contamination of food, of fish. And so this is, for this reason, an intense concern around cleaning up contaminated places and making sure contamination that is already in the environment doesn't spread to impact us. So the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the chemicals that were measured in water samples. And the information I received showed that they were measured in very low parts per trillion measurements. And that's similar to the legal limits for some PFAS chemicals. Now, the chemicals that were detected are slightly unusual. There's contamination all around military controlled sites in the United States and the Pacific Rim, really around the globe. But these three chemicals are not the type that are usually found on military bases. And for that reason, this is really upsetting information. It's really surprising. And it really begs some follow-up to understand, what are these chemicals? Where do they come from? Are they reliably measured? Is this a problem like is happening with a jet fuel where things are, the measuring tools are not sensitive enough to be there when the problem is happening? Just so you know, these chemicals that were found, excuse me, in the drinking water are more related to some of the industrial processes like waterproofing or treating fabrics or food packaging, and found more in industrial sites than some of the PFAS chemicals that we find widely polluting in the military bases. They are also found leaching out of landfills. And they kind of move most quickly. So sometimes they'd be the ones that would be detected before the rest of the plume arrives. And so that's the reason why we're saying, a conclusion would be that this really urgently needs to be tested and measured by the military, but also by independent sources to truly get a handle on what this means. It's not exactly what we would expect to see in a contamination surrounding a military site. On the next slide is a map put together by the Environmental Working Group, an advocacy organization. And this is to show places of suspected and confirmed military contamination through the islands. I have a couple other views of this map, but it's a website. And you click on each of these dots and it will give information about the site, about the testing, about when it happened. And this is maintained by an advocacy organization that is also just really trying to hold the military accountable to cleaning up the contamination. There's been a lot of study and there's been a lot of measurement and mapping, and very few, if not any, military bases have actually been treated to remove these contaminants to secure the water supplies and protect the water. The next slide, maybe could you go back one? Oh, okay, never mind. Things are in a different order. We can go forward. Showing that there are a couple other sites in the Hawaiian Islands and one more maybe. Okay, and so this is just so you know, across the United States where there have been military bases, is PFAS contamination, particularly in the water. And one idea I have here is to build some connection between people who've been really trying to call attention to this and advocate for cleanup of their water in their communities on the U.S. mainland with you all, or people who are interested in learning more, because it's been incredibly frustrating and incredibly slow to get anything beyond the assessment phase. I live in Colorado, and one of the communities here directly downriver from a military base had to put in place a multi-million-dollar water treatment facility. They had really record high concentrations of PFAS in the water, and they still haven't been fully reimbursed by the Air Force for putting in place a new water system and the ongoing cost of operating that. So there's an incredible frustration and organizing that is strong, but the challenge is that the U.S. military has kind of refused to comply with state-level drinking water standards, flouted Congress requesting information about cleanup and prioritizing cleanup. And it's just been a very challenging situation, I guess, is what I'd say. So I think I'll stop my slides there. I'm available to answer any questions that people have. And I know this is new information people are reacting to. I can share a summary that can go into the minutes also of these slides or any things that are captured in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Questions from CRI members?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Walter.
Sonia, with the new
I'm not hearing you. You might be muted in the main room.
Is that me?
No, wait.
Can you hear me now?
1 second. No, she can't hear us. Doesn't matter.
They have to unmute
Olelo.
Olelo.
Yeah.
Sonia, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now I can. Thank you.
Okay, I was wondering, what do you think of the new regulations that was just passed for the EPA regulations on PFAS? And what kind of an impact do you think it has on all of this?
Yeah. So I think people were actually really excited to see the new standards because they're very low. They're the most protective drinking water standards for any chemical that have been set. And they will cause a lot of water treatment that will need to happen in order to comply with those standards in the United States across the board. It's going to be really expensive to comply with those drinking water standards. And I think people are scrambling to understand how to pay for that, particularly when the U.S. military isn't reimbursing water systems for their treatment costs. There is money in the infrastructure package for PFAS testing for states and for paying for some of this treatment. But I think that it is pretty tragic to think that the cost of that contamination will be passed on to community members who have to decide between really expensive drinking water bills and clean and healthy water. And we know directly who the culprit is for this contamination when it comes to contamination around bases and around industrial sites. And me, as an advocate, want to see the companies and the industries that have caused this pollution to both clean up the historic mess, to make communities whole and to repair the damage for people who were impacted by contaminated water, and to make sure that they're preventing this contamination from spreading to otherwise clean water supplies.
Sonia, how expensive is it to purchase a test? How much does it cost? And then how much does getting the results cost? I mean,
yeah.
PFAS.
So as far as I see, the two results that we're talking about today were actually Cyclopure test kits, which are about $80 a piece. They're very reliable down to this 1 part per trillion level. They are the test kits that I think were provided by the Sierra Club, and I think we should follow up. Now I'm no longer with the Sierra Club, but I think there would be a way of helping support community members who want to get that information. And I think, like the jet fuel situation, it might take some monitoring day in and day out if these levels are right about the level that can be detected with tests. to see how they're changing and see if they're confirmed. But I think that isn't really a substitute for the military doing its own testing. And unlike the jet fuel situation, PFAS should be pretty present and pretty stable, not coming and going through an aquifer. So I think that hopefully it's not plagued with the same analytical challenges that has happened in the past.
Question. On a utility scale, so PFAS can be filtered out?
Yes. So activated carbon is a good treatment for the PFAS chemicals. It will remove a lot of other contaminants that are in the water at the same time. So we call that kind of a co-benefit. It is expensive. So the filters get clogged, either in your household on a pitcher scale, or if you've built a massive system like has happened in many states in the United States where there's a real contamination hotspot. And those have to be really closely monitored, and the filter materials have to be swapped so that they can continue to remove it to these very low levels. And that is expensive. And unfortunately, those costs will be ongoing. We don't think the PFAS plume just kind of disappears. They're not broken down by bacteria or sunlight or any kind of natural causes or time the way other types of contaminants might be. So that's, the whole point is to prevent that level of contamination because it's incredibly disruptive and expensive once that's happened.
I see a question. Go ahead.
Yes, Sonia, when you do change out the filters, the contamination is still in the filters. What's done with the contaminated filters?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So the idea of filtering the water is to just keep it out of the person. Of course, you've accumulated the PFAS or other contaminants on the filter. There are people studying what happens when you heat the filters. That's usually, they call it regeneration. You heat the filter and a lot of chemicals break down with heat and then are kind of dissipated. You can sometimes reuse the charcoal, which is called regeneration. Or the idea is that they burn it off. With PFAS chemicals, we actually sued the U.S. military when I was at Sierra Club to try to halt the incineration of PFAS chemical waste because they're firefighting chemicals. They're very stable, and we're not convinced that they break down completely during heat in an industrial waste incinerator or when you're heating a carbon filter to try to get the chemicals off. In my mind, though, better to trap them and keep them out of the public water and out of people's bodies. They need to be kind of contained in landfill or packaged somehow, and that is very wasteful. And again, this is why at Sierra Club our bigger focus was on preventing the chemicals from getting into the water in the first place, keeping industries from washing them into or dumping them into wastewater drains, dealing with landfills so that they're not a source of PFAS contamination leaching into groundwater and river water. We are finding the chemicals widely throughout the U.S. in pristine rivers, in industrial rivers. And so, on some level, I think this is news that I will be or other advocates will be delivering to community members in meetings like this all around the country, all around the world, really. And we are scrambling and using all our tools to try to contain the use of PFAS chemicals and the spread of the contamination. But unfortunately, this is, as you see from the map, a really common story that we're telling over and over in different places throughout the world.
Thank you. Could I ask one more?
Yeah.
Are you aware of any ways that somebody could remove PFAS from their body once it's in there?
Thank you. Yeah, that's an important question. So they linger in your body for a different amount of time, depending on the chemical, but generally for years. We do see that women have slightly lower concentrations in their body over time than men because of menstruation. Also because the act of pregnancy and breastfeeding is a way that, we're building a new body and nurturing a new body. And unfortunately, passing chemicals on through that act of nurturing. They will, if you remove the PFAS sources from your environment, they will work their way out of your body eventually. So another point is to really treat water, and to remove PFAS from circulation so that they're not entering our bodies. But unfortunately, there isn't a treatment or any other kind of medicine. I've seen clinical trials of a medicine, but otherwise it's nothing that's in practice right now that helps your body speed the process of eliminating the chemicals. And I need to, when I talk about pregnancy and breastfeeding, I need you to know that those are, really important sacred acts and they're very beneficial and they're very irreplaceable. As a parent and a mom, I know that. And so, we do this to clean up our environment, to make our environment safe for people, for wildlife, for the rest of the planet. I want you to know how intense that is, but also how intensely we take this responsibility of trying to protect the environment we live in so that it's safe for all of these natural acts that we value so much.
Thank you.
Sonia, do you know, as it passes through our bodies, are there specific target organs or organs that will retain portions of it? And then are they associated with any specific cancers? And then is there a testing that's available?
Sure. So for the new chemicals that have EPA water limits right now, they have been more studied. Signature cancer would be kidney cancer, testicular cancer, but they really do impact a lot of systems of the body. The 3 chemicals I talked about that were measured recently in drinking water are more mysterious. We don't know as much about them and may have similar dynamics. That we'd assume they'd have similar dynamics, but haven't been, individually studied. The problem with studying people is that you're always exposed to a mixture of things. But I'd say, this real signature effects would be kidney and liver damage, kidney cancer and testicular cancer, as well as some intestinal problems like ulcerative colitis has been really strongly linked to PFAS exposure. But I haven't seen chemicals that impact as many parts of the body as PFAS chemicals do.
Okay, so we'll do Susan, and then Mandy has a question online, and then we have some public testimony also. Go ahead.
Just very quickly, so when farmers are using water that has PFAS in it to irrigate, does it get into the plants, and is that another way of ingestion?
Yes, we've learned through some cases in the state of Maine that when PFAS get into the wastewater system, they accumulate in the solid material, which is used as a fertilizer. And also some cases where highly contaminated irrigation water was used, that the chemicals can go into the foods we eat, most particularly like dairy, cattle, meat. In plants, they're not always taken up in the part of the plant that you would eat yourself. So certain things like corn or wheat, the idea is that less ends up in the berry or the edible portion than the rest of the plant. But once a chemical is out in nature that's this long lasting, it just moves where it wants to move. It accumulates throughout our food supply. It moves in, is measured in rain and is measured in the deep, ocean. And so, it's unfortunate that, still legacy compounds like dioxins and PCBs that were used heavily in industry, or some of the persistent pesticides used in Hawaii, that, some of the residues still just remain in the food supply and in the water, and will be there as a legacy of our contamination for a very long time to come.
Thanks. Okay, Mandy, you have a question?
I have a couple. One, it's really great to know that you're in Colorado. I just came from Colorado. I was stationed at Peterson, so I'm really familiar with your PFAS situation there. The other thing, I have a couple of questions based off of this court case that we just got out of for the JP5. So I'm not sure how long PFAS has been studied, but if the military were to take a sample, and they were to hold on to that sample, we know that JP5 breaks down over time. And what the military has done, and I feel like in a more deceptive way, is that they compare JP5 that's in the water now, or TPH in the water now, to the original sample. And so clearly that fingerprint, if you will, is not matching what it was, say, 2 years ago, because we know that TPH breaks down. It doesn't look the same that it does, from 2 years ago. Would that be the same, in your opinion? Is that the same? Like if the Navy has taken samples a year ago and they're comparing every PFAS detection now to that sample a year ago, is it going to look the same, or does it break down over time?
So it's very different, actually. They're very persistent. And so I'd say, a small positive thing is that samples that were collected a long time ago would generally be thought to be reflective. The chemicals aren't going anywhere. They're not going to evolve, won't break down in any substantial way.
The other, for a lack of better acronyms, BS thing that we heard in court is that, or that we've heard all along, is that TPH detections are not actually TPH detections. They're somehow like reactions to gloves or potentially like chlorine, or we've heard a number of things, right? Does PFAS, like, do you see a lot of lab errors in the study of PFAS over the years? Because every time that there is a TPH detection, the military and the EPA chases that down in order to say, like, to prove that it's not. And they've come up with the most bizarre excuses as to why it's not TPH. Is the detection of PFAS like pretty widely studied? And have you heard, of these crazy excuses as to what it could be? Or is PFAS pretty straight up and legitimate when you detect it?
Less complicated. I would say it's less complicated. The concentrations that are measured here that I was sent are at the edge of detection for the cyclopure kits. So that's why I think the repeating testing is necessary, and testing using a couple different analytical techniques. But I don't expect it to come and go the way that you guys are experiencing with the other types of fuel contamination, and the testing is just getting more and more reliable. I think that that it shouldn't be as complicated to get a conclusive answer.
Two more questions, and you may have covered this. I'm sorry if I didn't hear it. What would someone who's on the Navy drinking water system look for in their water? Does this stuff have a sheen? Does it smell like something? Does it look like something? So you're shaking your head no. So it looks like an odorless thing.
Nothing. Then you wouldn't have those. Expect to have those, immediate reactions. These are chronic. Okay. So unfortunately, or fortunately, hard to say what's better when you're dealing with contaminated water. You wouldn't see or smell or expect any kind of irritation or immediate, reaction in the throat or in the nose or in the skin or anything like that.
Yeah. What we heard in court with the JP5 stuff is clearly a reasonable person would have stopped drinking the water if they smelt it and saw a sheen and all these things. And it's like, well, some of us couldn't smell anything at that point in our lives because of COVID or whatever else, or, and so I wasn't sure if that's something that residents could be looking for, like what it looked like or what it smelled like. What about symptoms that one would typically have if exposed?
I've lots of people who drink contaminated water for decades and weren't aware. Now suddenly they're saying, oh, wow, this is wild. I've had intestinal problems. My husband's had immune system problems. They're putting the pieces together in retrospect. And it's incredibly stressful. We, are in touch with or working with communities where exposures, unfortunately, were maybe thousands of times more intense than this when you think about the totality of the PFAS. And now they're living with these questions about, what is going to happen in the future. And in a situation where the medical providers really don't have the science or the information to be able to even tell them what to look for, unfortunately. But this is a very slow moving impacts to the body.
Okay. And then my very last question is it possible for us to get a hold of your slides and put them on our website along with potentially your recommendations for, I know the test, I'm not sure if you're the one that recommended that to us or not, but it sounds like we have a reliable one. But maybe 2 to 3, just that we could suggest to the community based on different price ranges and based off of how credible these certain tests are or reliable these tests are would be really helpful if we could put them on our website.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Tara, and then we have questions from the public.
Thank you so much for coming, Sonia. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. I see that your title is Director of Community Science. I love that. I'm a student myself. My question is a little bit different. Do you have community science efforts taking place around this topic anywhere, whether it's in your own, or you said that you also link communities of impacted people to for various reasons and advocacy and whatnot. Can you speak to us about any of those efforts and what those look like?
Yeah, well, I'm very new to NRDC. I started in March, and I'm building, relationships and science support for our environmental justice partners at NRDC. At Sierra Club, where I was for 5 years prior, we were and are doing this community water testing with these low-cost PFAS testing kits. as one of the key efforts. And so we do have people in many states who are wading into rivers and, looking at the ends of pipes and putting this information together. And part of it is because there's been so much secrecy around the use of these chemicals, and about the contamination. And there's been just so much frustration over the slow pace of the assessment and visibility and transparency from the U.S. military and from other major polluters, that this tool has really brought to the forefront and to the public the extent of contamination, and really fueled conversations around prevention, around cleanup, around accountability. And so it is a really great example of a pretty fail-safe technology that's sensitive at very low concentrations and is affordable and repeatable, and a situation where there's a contamination crisis where the industry and the military hold too many cards. They know too much about where the contamination is, and the rest of us are really in the dark. So it's been a very good equalizing factor. And in many cases, when Sierra Club members are out in creeks collecting water samples, the point is to motivate that conversation and to get the trusted parts of the government to do the assessments and to really map out the contamination and make the plan. Because, we're here to cue protection, and we're not trying to take the place of the government, and it's not our responsibility, but making pollution visible to the public and asking those important questions about why it's legal to dump these chemicals down a wastewater drain or into a river or into someone's food supply is just adding a lot of intensity and adding a lot of grounding to these questions and urgency to these questions. It isn't moving as quickly as anyone would want it to be. I'm not here to tell you that we found like a solution, but we are growing a network of people who are understanding the problem, relating to each other. And I would really like to make connections with you all to other people who are fighting military contamination in places that could share some of their strategies and tricks and learnings, hopefully in a way that brings some solidarity and visibility to what's happening, throughout the island of Hawaii. Islands of Hawaii. Sorry, it's late here.
Thank you. Melissa, you ready to have a question?
Sonia, thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you could hear me, but thank you. I'm actually the house that had the PFAS in it.
I'm not hearing you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm Melissa Cook, and we had the 3 PFAS in our water at 4.5 parts per trillion total. And so I have a bunch of questions for you. Okay. This was taken out of my kitchen sink with an aerator. Would an aerator alter the results of the test?
Not to my knowledge.
I didn't think so. I just wanted to make sure. You said that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the runoff of these types of PFAS is quick and can lead to other things. Can you expound on that? These are a mystery.
Just to say that the 3 chemicals are known to kind of be the ones that travel more quickly through the groundwater. So sometimes when there's a plume, the ones that move faster arrive first. And the PFBA in particular is really short chain and a newer generation of compound. But as a result, anytime you find these shorter chains in groundwater or in surface water, the question is, where are they coming from and what's coming next?
I appreciate that, because that's a huge thing. So and I'm just trying to understand this, if I have PFAS in my water, according to these results, without treatment, they're going to remain in my water. Is that correct?
I'd say at this point, first thing is to do some repeat sampling and make sure that that's true, because they're on the edge of the ability to measure them. But yes, once a water supply is contaminated, those chemicals don't kind of just pass through or break down; they remain.
Okay, and this is just for clarification, because I know the Navy's going to say something. Does flushing remove PFAS?
I wouldn't expect to remove PFAS unless you really identified the source, turned off the source, barricaded the source from seeping more into your water. But unless you had like a contaminated line or something very discrete, that's not a strategy that's being used anywhere in the U.S. mainland that I'm aware of.
I just wanted to clarify that, because I'm sure that's one of the responses that I was going to get. So just a little background. We've had TPH in our water in October, a higher level in December, and and then haloacetic acids in our water. I think that was March. I can't remember, the beginning of this year. Recent tests that they did. I had this test done on April 11th. And then I had the Navy out there testing my water on the 17th because I'm having reactions to the water. It's affecting my health. So I've had a lot of inconsistencies with what's in my water and when. Does that go along with this PFAS potential, these mystery, like something else is occurring? Because they haven't been able to give me any answers, which is one of the reasons why I did this test. I don't, at this point, you know, I don't feel like we're actually getting any help. Can you speak to that or no?
I kept following up with more testing to really confirm that it's there, and it's there in several points in time would be the really important first step.
Okay. So if I get another test done and Lord forbid it comes back positive with other results, can I send them to you so you can help me? Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
And oh, wait, I just want to say one other thing. I just want to talk to the community really quickly. If you guys live on Hickam, then you've probably been experiencing contaminants of some sort. And you should probably do your own education and go out and get one of these tests, because it's not really a matter of if you have, it's probably how much you've been contaminated.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, and I'd say let's try to figure out if we can get some Sierra Club tests to you, and we can do it kind of methodically. You know, this is the government's responsibility to measure contamination and keep people safe. And so, we want to use the testing strategically to push for what we need, which is conclusive information and safe water. And unfortunately, you know, individual people testing, it's hard to know what to say about it. It would be helpful if people are testing that someone is pulling those results together and looking at them over time and for trends. So, you know, let's try to stay coordinated in that effort, because testing alone, you know, people can't bring that test to the military and get relief it takes working together. It takes a strategy, and it takes being coordinated.
Thank you, Sonia. We do have a few questions that came in via chat. Could you recommend a home filtration system? It's a activated carbon of some kind.
Yeah, pitcher filters will remove or reduce PFAS chemicals. You want to change the filter. And in people living in places with much higher concentrations, we kind of, it's a second line of defense, but certainly a household pitcher that has carbon filter that's changed out with regularity will reduce, if not remove, PFAS and other contaminants.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, Sonia, we will continue this relationship, and I look forward to working with you more on this. And the CRI will put information on our website about how to get tests and how to work together, as Sonia suggested, so that we can coordinate. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you all. Have a great night.
While we're on the topic, I would like to ask for your take on PFAS in the water and these test results.
Sure. First, as Sonia mentioned, we understand that and we appreciate that PFAS is a contaminant that is of concern throughout our nation. And we will continue as the Department of Health to monitor this issue. In fact, the Department of Health Hazard Evaluation and Emergency Response Office has posted on its website about PFAS. In addition, we also post anytime there is a detection of PFAS in a well or in source water, we post that as well. So you can find that in our website. Thus far, it's been below the MCLs. But we have all of that on our website, so you might want to take a look at that. The PFAS, as we cannot comment today on the test results or the sampling methodology or the test kits, because we were just given that yesterday, I believe. So we're taking a look at that, and so we just can't comment today on it. I can say, though, that, and I should have asked Sonia, but the source water of Red Hill, the Waiava shaft, was tested as of October, and it tested non-detect for PFAS. So we're talking with the Navy about trying to test more frequently the source water to see if that's the source of the contamination that you may all be finding in your homes. That being said, there are certain instances where there is something wrong in your home, PFAS may be one of them, that it is that you might want to consider looking at your landlord to ask them to do something about it. Such as there are instances where there is mold in your ceilings, or mold, where it is not necessarily the responsibility of the state of Hawaii, the state government, to go into your home to fix the mold in your home, but it is the responsibility of your landlord or the homeowner. So in that respect, you might consider also, in addition to us asking the military to do further testing, you might want to consider seeking some advice or remedy from your landlord. The other thing is that the Navy, I believe, is going to be sending us a plan, which I hope will include the remediation plan of the aquifer, which will include further testing of the PFAS in the aquifer. So we look forward to seeing that as well. In addition, we also were given the report from the University of Hawaii yesterday as well. So we haven't even been able to, we haven't reviewed that as well, so we can't be commenting on that. Someone has a question.
I was curious. I know that testing can be really complicated and there's a million things that we want to know, but the tests have to be very specific, like a single bullet rather than a shotgun. Is testing for PFAS like that? Are we testing and looking for the wrong ones and different ones are showing up? Can you just speak to that a little bit?
So I can phone a friend. I don't know if
Rosalie, do you know if Lauren is on the Zoom?
She's on, but she is not a panelist.
Can you make her a panelist?
Yeah, I'm trying to get her to come on.
Okay, thanks. All right, you can just vamp for a few minutes until Lauren comes on.
Does the Navy do the testing? Is that their test, or do you folks do your own testing for PFAS?
So we haven't done any.
We have done PFAS testing in certain distribution systems, but it's not regulated yet at that time. So we were doing investigations of it.
Okay, so the Waiava test, that's Department of Health test,
part of the long-term,
not the Navy's
that was
test.
part of the long-term monitoring.
Yes.
Okay,
And that
so
was
the Navy
that
did
was
the
done by the
testing.
Navy.
That was done by the Navy.
Yeah.
Yes.
The non-detect. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm detecting some distrust in the Navy testing, Sam, and I'm wondering if the Department of Health has capacity to do those, how you were doing secondary testing for some of the other things.
So I know moving forward, the EPA in the extended drinking water monitoring plan will be taking split samples and will be doing their own tests. So the EPA will be doing it as well. I will have to check with our team whether we are able to get out there and do some further testing.
Okay. Mandy, I see you have your hand up.
Yep. Hi, Kathy and
Hi.
Joanna. Thank you so much for being there. I wish I was there now too, sitting right next to you. I want to go back to something that you said about mold in the ceiling, and I just want to be very clear and make sure I understand this. Are you saying that if someone has mold in their ceiling, somehow that could be attributed to PFAS coming out of their water and being detected in their water system?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
What I was saying was there are instances where the government, state of Hawaii, is not able to go into a home to do certain things, where you would have to then rely on your landlord to remediate the mold in your ceiling. It would be a landlord-tenant issue versus the state of Hawaii going in and remediating your single home for mold.
So it's just an example, like an
that
analogous.
that was an example.
Okay.
So could you give us an example of how PFAS would be in a home because of the landlord?
Well, it could be from premise plumbing, right? It could be from Teflon tape that's used in the whatever the piping.
Right. Is there a
things
particular
like
type of premise plumbing, like PVC or?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer.
That would be good to know, right? Because there's lots of new homes being built here and lots of old homes, and it would be nice to know. Yeah. That's an issue.
I think in particular we need to get the Navy to step up the testing around PFAS. Yeah.
And then one other thing,
I
had
one
my
follow-up
test.
question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
Oh, I had my house tested for PFAS using Cyclopure, and they said they tested for 51 different. I know there's thousands, but they did 51. So again, I think when the Navy does, we would like them to test for as many as they possibly can.
Yeah. Okay, Mandy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up premise plumbing. Does that include hot water heaters, Kathy? So could this PFAS stuff get stuck in a hot water heater, or does it have the same consistency as far as like being sticky over time that would latch onto the pipes?
Yeah, that's beyond my expertise. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
And I note that Lauren is on the Zoom now. If you have anything to add, you're welcome to.
Oh, sorry. I don't have anything to add regarding PFAS. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. No, Kathy, I think we'd have to check with Roger. The one thing I was going to say is the methods, there's different for drinking water methods versus what's in the ground, like groundwater environmental sampling. So Dennis would have to be able to talk about the drinking water methods, not me. Okay. So,
all right.
All right.
Thanks, Lauren.
In terms of I am hung up on detect and non-detect. And can you just say a little bit more about when the lab results come back and say non-detect, that just means that it's below the measurement that the test can pick up?
Can pick up.
Okay. Doesn't mean that there's not anything there. Yeah. Okay.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so if we can detect it, that has to do with the sensitivity of the test, and then there's that level, and then there's the actual like regulatory level or recommended level. Okay, all right, thanks. All right, it is now 6:00. We are way behind schedule. Can we move on from PFAS? Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. I really want to get into it about the groundwater and the extended drinking water monitoring. And I think it also goes together with the pump and dump water into Halaba Stream. So we can start there. I don't know if you have any like opening comments you wanted to make about the groundwater monitoring plan.
No.
Everyone should know that Department of Health rejected the Navy's groundwater monitoring plan, and I think it'd be good to just help us understand why.
Well, I'm gonna ask that Lauren come on she's going to be our speaker for the groundwater monitoring.
Welcome, Lauren. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. So I guess I wanted to go over first why we disapproved of the most recent version of their groundwater monitoring plan, because we did receive versions prior to that. The main reasons we disapproved of it was it didn't provide sufficient details as to what steps they would take should they identify potential plume migration. It also didn't really provide enough details for what would happen or how the regulating agencies would be provided updates on what was going on. We also felt that it was, we wanted some additional parameters monitored for on a more frequent basis than the Navy was proposing, in particular, the natural attenuation, some of the natural attenuation parameters, as those can actually be one of the first signs that you might have potential migration as the plume moves. And we also felt that the Navy's timeline for when they were going to provide the regulating agencies the data once the samples were received was not quick enough. We wanted to be able to make sure that we had that information before they went out and sampled again that month, so that way we could identify what was going on. So those were the main reasons why we disapproved of it. And what we chose to do instead was, since we had been having a lot of back and forth and we had gotten to a point where it just needed additional details and as to what the Navy will do, not what they may do, we kind of decided to revise the plan for them, provide them with the revised plan, and then have them implement the revised plan along with the reduction in the flow rate. So they did implement the plan on April 29th, and they have reduced the flow into Halava Stream as of then. And we did receive our first update from them last week. So we get weekly updates from the Navy about data evaluation and whatnot. And they did start doing their increased monitoring last week. And we just started seeing some of the initial unvalidated results coming through, but we haven't received all of those yet. So that's kind of where we are with the plan and why it was disapproved.
Okay. All
Does
right.
anyone have any questions on that?
Well, I just want to clarify, make sure that I understood, make sure, I'm going to now tell back to you what you just told me to make sure I understood it. Okay. So there were several insufficiencies in what the Navy offered. And so the Department of Health turned around and made a plan for them that they are now implementing. And it includes weekly updates. So the increased monitoring, goes together with the decrease in the amount of water that's being pumped out of the aquifer, treated and dumped into Halava Stream. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thanks. All right. So, and how long is this revised groundwater monitoring plan going to be in place?
Until we feel that they have enough data to where we can safely say that they can go back to their original plan, which was the monthly sampling and the quarterly sampling instead of the bi-monthly sampling. Okay. But it's the way it's written, the regulating agencies have to provide approval for that. So
okay, so it's until further notice they will be proceeding like this. Okay. And these sample results or some kind of these updates, are they available to the public?
No, the updates that we get weekly are not, because they're unvalidated data. Okay. So they're not validated. But we as the regulating agencies want to make sure we can at least get the unvalidated data and then be able to see what the decisions the Navy's making. So those updates, we kind of get them in a weekly meeting that we have with the Navy. So those updates aren't readily available. But once we do get they do provide weekly. Kathy, I don't know if these are online, but I'd have to check with Kellyanne, but sometimes the Navy does provide weekly operations reports, and I believe those are public. And that does include detections of petroleum and whatnot from the shaft, but I'd have to double check and take that back and get back to you on that, Marty.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it would be nice for the public to be able to see how things are going in terms of the groundwater monitoring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm so sorry. What does unvalidated mean?
Yeah.
No, that's a good question. Go ahead.
I'm confused about that.
So unvalidated means it's a raw lab report, raw lab result. So it's basically the machine spits out a number, right, from when it's been analyzed. But then what'll happen is a chemist or a third-party validator will kind of look through it and go, is there something that could say that this is biased low, that this is biased high, that it's not representative? So they take into account other things, like if the sample was out of hold time, all those things kind of go into help decide like what's the validated result. So the majority of the time, the unvalidated result is the same thing as a validated, but you still have to go through that process to make sure that result is actually representative. So does that explain it?
Where does the process take place? Is it at the lab, or is it with you folks or with the Navy? Who validates it?
So the Navy has a third-party validator that does the validation.
So, Lauren, the Navy hired a laboratory to run the analysis. Is that right? The Navy is not running the analysis themselves.
No.
Right,
no, so the Navy has a laboratory. Well, they hired a laboratory. The laboratory analyzes the sample, and then a separate company that the Navy hired does a third-party validation on it.
Does the swarm team validate or unvalidate results?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Does the swarm team? Are you familiar with the swarm team?
So I think the swarm team is related to the drinking water
It's
portion,
just drinking water.
not the groundwater.
Not the groundwater.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Other questions for Lauren on the groundwater monitoring plan?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Walter.
I don't think I understand what you said. So initially, somebody takes a sample, it goes to a lab for analysis. That the guy that does that analysis does it. He meets all of the or he or she meets all of the requirements for an EPA certified lab, right? So the procedure they go through, the handling, is all part of their certification. So they provide us with, provide you with the correct data, and then somebody else comes along, a third party, verifies what they did, and that's the second validation. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's still so when the machine spits it out, it still has to get validated by a person at that main laboratory. So it's still not even validated from the lab. So it goes through multiple rounds of validation before it's considered valid, so to speak. I apologize if I'm confusing you, but it's part of the lab process, just to make sure that the data is reliable. But we are sometimes we're making decisions on unvalidated data, but because it can come so quickly, but the validation does take some time. So
and the validation is designed just to make sure that a negative is actually a negative and a positive is actually a positive.
But it doesn't mean that we're not making this, we're still taking it into account. That's why we want the unvalidated, because we want to know, is there something that we need to, oh my gosh, something's going on.
Yeah.
But
the urgency warrants.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are validators always objective third parties and not like the Navy?
Yeah, it's not a Navy staff member validating from what I understand.
Or a Navy contractor.
I believe they have a third party.
Or a Navy contractor.
They are Navy contractors.
It's a Navy contractor.
Yeah. They are all paid by the Navy.
But yeah, thank you for wanting to see the unvalidated results. I think that's important too.
All right. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. Anything else on groundwater right now?
Oh, I see Mandy.
Yeah. Mandy has a hand up. Thanks.
Yep. We kind of alluded to it, but I just want to be clear. I like to make things very clear. So the lab, the validator, and the third party lab, they're all paid for in some way, shape, or form by the Navy, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So even when you all do split samples, you all came out, EPA came out and they did split samples. I was there at someone's house, Lacey and I were, and we watched a representative from the DOH take a split sample, and I appreciated that. But were those samples then ran through a lab that the Department of Health paid for, or did the Navy also pay for that?
I don't know. I'm not drinking water team. Yeah. So Kathy, Joanna, do you?
Yeah, I think in those instances,
from what I remember, the answer is no, right? We
do our own. But we do our own. We send our samples to our own contractor.
So the drinking water methods are EPA methods, and because they're EPA methods, they're done by a state or EPA certified lab, and because they are
that.
I'm sorry?
As I am. I said I'm not as concerned about that because there's a lot of trust even with EPA right now. Mm-hmm. I'm not as concerned about who the lab, who's certified. I'm concerned about the money, following the money, and who's paying for what.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were you going to say after that?
Just that the drinking water certified labs do not have this validation process because they are certified.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
I know that the plan hasn't quite been approved, but the one that is expected to be approved, are there different contaminants that are going to be monitored in the groundwater compared to what has been?
Lauren, that's a groundwater monitoring.
So different contaminants from what has been in the past? Is that what you're asking for, Lacey?
Yes, since we started watching the plume and all of that.
No, these are the same contaminants. I mean, we've added some natural attenuation parameters, but I started working on this about a year ago, so I'm not sure what was done way in the beginning. To be honest, I'd have to go back and double check and see what the old parameters were, but for now they're your not standard, but they're primarily petroleum associated contaminants, and then some natural attenuation parameters to monitor for that kind of stuff. But I honestly, I don't know what was being done in the past. Are you looking for like a certain type of contaminant?
Yes. So, like the antifreeze and the other additives, and I know we had brought up EDB and all of these other things. So I'm just wondering, were there any additions made?
I think EDB is in there. The antifreeze, I believe they analyzed some samples for, but I don't think that's regular on the plan anymore because they never detected it in the groundwater. But I apologize, I don't have it on me. I know that we do regularly ask for the antifreeze and the additives, so I believe they were analyzed for on a regular basis, but that might be something we may be adding down the line again, because I don't know if it's in this version. But the EPA and the DOH, as the plan was just primarily focused on, the revision that we made to the plan was primarily focused to get them to be able to reduce the pumping rate, and the primary drivers are the petroleum, and what we see first are the natural attenuation parameters. That's kind of what we wanted to focus on, but we did state in our letter to the Navy that we may require additional revisions based on the data that they provide or as things move along. So that's something we can consider. But Lacey, I can get back to you because I don't know for sure if that's in there.
Okay, I think I would be concerned about the things that don't naturally attenuate,
Yeah.
My last question, Lauren, when you're looking at that and when you send that list, I guess what I've always wanted to know is, we know that there are trade secret constituents or contaminants as part of the Red Hill and the drinking water system. I know that you guys aren't a DOD or a federal agency, but if those national trade secret constituents, I imagine they're being monitored by the Navy, did pop hot, if you will, or above, would they notify you, or do you have visibility on those national trade secret constituents?
I'm not aware of any national trade secret constituents.
We got that list from Roger. He put it out there to the public.
I'd have to talk to Roger. I'm not sure exactly which ones you're pertaining to, but I do talk to Roger on a regular basis. So, I'd have to check with him on that. I'm not 100% sure, Mandy. Sorry.
And to be clear, we don't know what they are either, even with the TSSCI security clearance, but they are listed under Roger's memo as trade secret constituents or additives. I can't remember which one it was. But I guess my question would be, do you guys have access to those?
I don't
really, the public doesn't know what they are
monitoring for, but I'd have to check with Roger. I don't know because I don't know what they are. Sorry.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, let's move to the extended drinking water monitoring plan. Yeah, let's talk about it. All right. Okay, so I don't know. Do you have any opening overall statements you want to make about where things are? It feels like to me that they are just plowing ahead with whatever it is they're going to do. They being the Navy.
Yeah. So the extended drinking water monitoring plan consists of additional surveillance of the two drinking water systems to test for the 100% of the residences. and to continue monitoring at schools and the child development centers. So TPH detection will include forensic techniques to determine if the TPH detection is associated with the petroleum. So
okay,
yeah.
All right. So questions? Okay,
Lacey,
right?
I haven't seen the plan, but I know some of the feedback I've got is that when people are concerned and they're calling the EOC, that all of a sudden the phone calls are not being answered. And so I'm wondering, is that piece in the plan? Like, is that going to be a requirement?
Yeah, I believe that they have a team, and I don't remember the name of the team, but it's an all-encompassing type of review and inspection and investigation, not just of the water. So is that recent that they're not answering?
I've had a few people say that they've called in and then the phone calls it rings. Nobody picks up. So I guess the concern is that now that we've ditched the long-term monitoring, gone into this extended drinking water, which seems kind of mysterious right now, is that they're not answering the phone calls when people have the concerns. And, and not only that, but I've also heard the opposite feedback for people who did get their phone call to go through. When they got the results, suddenly everything was non-detect when, the month prior there were detects. So I'm wondering if those new procedures are tying into the differences we see.
So so the testing method that they're using is being a little adjusted. So we know that drinking water is treated with a disinfectant, which is in this case like a bleach, the chlorine, before entering the distribution system, and then to remove those interferences caused by that disinfectant. The Navy will be quenching the sample. I think they mentioned it before, to remove the interference of that reactive halogen in the disinfectant. So the chlorine, bromine, and other things that could produce the artifacts which are created by the disinfectant reaction with the chemicals used in the test method.
Mm. I guess I know everybody else is thinking the same thing, but what are your thoughts on, chlorine, fuel mixing? It causes something harmful, but then we just remove that and say, look, we removed it, it's okay. But then the people are still like, well, there's a sheen and my skin is burning. And what are your thoughts on the quenching process, not really explaining what we're trying to get to?
So I believe the quenching was supposed to be part of the original process already, and it's for the drinking water test methods. So the method that was used for the total petroleum hydrocarbons is not a drinking water method. So we do need to clarify that there's two different types of methods that were being used.
So Marty, when you opened up this session, you said you feel like the Navy's just going forward. The extended drinking water plan has not been finalized, but they are using they are still testing the water using the new the extended drinking water plan. So. It was put on the website, then it was taken down, and it still hasn't been finalized, but hopefully it'll be finalized shortly. So,
okay, all right.
Mandy,
do you have your hand up for this, or is that from before?
It was from before.
Okay,
I'll yield for right now.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, Susan.
So just to clarify, you were saying for drinking water. The Navy, when they took the sample, should have done the quenching. I understand there's a tablet that can sort of offset the chlorine before it was sent to the lab. If that would be the proper procedure, that wasn't done?
So the quenching is not going to remove the JP5.
No, but isn't it supposed to remove the chlorine?
I'm waiting for some assistance.
From Lauren?
No, Lauren is
Lauren
not.
is groundwater.
Lauren is groundwater. But you know what we could do is we could take that back and respond to you.
Basically, we just want to understand what the proper process is, right? Like we are going to do our best to watchdog the Navy as the extended drinking water monitoring plan rolls out, and so we want to, it's unnerving, right? We already have low trust, right? And then they take the sample and they drop something in there, and then they're like, "Oh, we'll send this off to the lab." We're like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, so that's the procedure that we do for VOCs and SVOCs, the semi-volatile organics, and it's a drinking water method.
Okay.
So that's possibly where there's a disconnect.
And as you remember, when we were here with EPA and DOH and the Navy, we had mentioned that we had started our investigation, our independent investigation. We hope to get you guys the results of that next week.
Oh, great. Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah.
Yay.
So much.
Just to be clear, so this the investigation started in February.
Yep.
Okay, and this was of everyone on Navy water lines.
Not everyone.
Okay.
We took samples of some homes on the Navy system.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, Walter.
So you guys have accepted the quenching process as a new revised procedure for the drinking water samples?
So they were always to be used as drinking water samples, but the drinking water samples were being tested with the environmental method for the TPH. So that's where there's a disconnect. The drinking water methods are for the volatile organic compounds and the semi-volatile organic compounds. Those are regulated contaminants. But the TPH is not. So there was 2 different methods that are being used.
I get that, but 2.5 years we've been going through. We got 9,000 samples, and all of a sudden now we decided we're going to change the analytical process with this quenching procedure. And I've seen the report, and I understand what they're saying, but when I look at their chromatograms, they're looking at all of the. If we look at all of the volatile the total petroleum hydrocarbons, they're not looking at all of them. They're only looking at those little peaks, and that's all we're talking about. What about all the other peaks? What about the other parts of the total petroleum hydrocarbons that they don't seem to be counting? So you go through 2.5 years, 9,000 samples, you're going to change the process, and every member of the public is going to say, why are you guys doing that? Are you doing that just to accommodate the Navy's contention that the water is safe? I was at the open house yesterday. That's what they're telling the public. The water is safe. You have to believe the science. The DOH, EPA says it's safe. But then these people are getting sick. And you talked about the water quality action team thing. Well, people call and they ask for water. And we were told, all of us were told, they call, they ask for water, we'll give them water. Well, that's not true. Not only they're not getting water, they're being denied water. So it makes it, from 3 months ago till now, it's gotten worse. So I don't know that in the extended drinking water monitoring plan and their quality action team thing, we're not doing anything to help the families. It has actually gotten worse. So we, all of this other stuff set aside, we need to force them to do something. Either we post a notice and tell them their system is going to provide some people will get sick, and then they need to do something about providing alternate water. We had a commitment from Admiral Gray a couple months ago, and he made a commitment and said, we will look at engineering, we would look at bringing in alternate water. From then till now, nothing. And I don't think they're making any provisions to do so. So it's not your system, I understand that. But it is a public system. And you do have some control over the public system. At the very least, post a notice or issue a notification to tell people. One of the biggest problems is people don't know. And always, please keep in mind that these are military families. They are not at liberty to go speak up. I mean, the few people that come and speak up are courageous. But like we can talk all day long, but they can't because they have to live in the system.
So,
please do something.
So, as I understood it, the Navy was going to put a notice or something, notice in the welcome packet. I thought that had happened.
We haven't seen it.
Okay.
We did get it.
They did issue a package that was this nice fancy story about all the stuff that happened, all the great things they did. No place in that package is there a notification to the families that the water, if you drink this water, you could get sick.
I'd also like to mention that I was sent the Capilina magazine, and they did include a letter in the Capilina magazine, and it's a letter that says that the TPH were false detections, that the water is safe, and, it's very dismissing about the real concerns that are happening right now. So it's, they've actually done the opposite of what we've asked.
Yeah. And that is from February.
Yes.
So that's been, so even though we have since been able to raise these concerns, we feel like there's still, the Navy's just not meeting expectations in terms of notice to people who on their water lines.
I will take a note and I'll speak to Admiral Barnett about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
The other thing too, Walter mentioned a great point about water, like the water delivery and alternate water source. Last night, there was a town hall and it was streamed live by many of our community members, and Admiral Mark Williams and Sherry Ng, went on the record and said, when the question was asked, can you please provide water again, a water buffalo, alternate water source, like you name it. And the response was, the data does not support, the water is safe and we're not giving out water because the water is safe. So they have now drawn a line in the sand and said that they're not providing water anymore. And I just feel like if you don't know what the source of this contamination is and you can't explain why people are still getting sick, then water should be provided. And, Kathy, I'm looking at you because at this point, we're not getting any support from the federal agencies. And so as a state entity, to piggyback on what Walter said, like, is there any way that with the public notice to encourage water, an alternate water source be available?
I'll take that back, Mandy, and look at that. But it is really the military or the landlord has the responsibility of bringing safe drinking water to its customers. So I'll take that back. And we'll also, I'm adding that to my list of things to speak to Admiral Barnett about.
Okay.
And I guess my last question is, sorry.
Can I just say something really quick on that note before we move to another? The military is more than a landlord. They're also a utility company. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a distinction that could be made to where your advocacy would be influential because of them being more than a landlord. They're also the utility company providing the water, just like the Board of Water Supply would.
Good.
Question. Just before we came to this meeting.
Wait, Mandy.
Oh, sorry.
I did promise somebody that I talked to last week to let you know how dehumanized they feel. Mm-hmm. They ask for water. They're begging for water. They're humiliated, and it's degrading when they're denied. And they're just said, we can't give you that much water. What they got was a case of water for 4 people. So, how do you bathe with that? And how do you wash and cook with that? So please keep that in mind. It's just these guys, for 2.5 years now, we've not been able to get them the help that they should have gotten on day one.
Okay, Mandy, go for it.
I just have to ask, I think it speaks volumes. I'm a big actions are louder than words thing. So I do think it speaks volumes that you all are there. And I can't reiterate much how grateful I am that you're there. But, before we came into this meeting, we got an email from Amy from the EPA. And I guess they took a look at our agenda because we have continued to invite them and the Navy and the DLA to show up. And they continue to fly to the island and, lock arms and join forces. All the federal agencies continue to do that, and they're not here to support the community, and they're not here to show up, even though, a community town hall is not part of the AOC. Like, this is required, and they're not showing up. Now this is the third time. So what really bothers me is that we got, an email right before this meeting started from Amy on behalf of the EPA that speaks for everyone. And so, I don't want to put you in a position, but I would like to know, just for full transparency for our community, when we're getting these emails from the EPA that says the DOH and the EPA, and, when we get emails like that, it seems almost like a bully, like we're being bullied. It's like, you guys are this little entity over here that represents the community, and all of us say this. And, I would like to see individual emails from each party, because I feel like, Kathy, and I don't want to speak for you, but you keep getting put in these situations where the EPA and the Navy are speaking for you. They keep adding you to like that narrative. And I want to know, like, is that true? Do they talk to you before they send out these mass emails and use the DOH's name in vain as well? Or is it possible for you all to send your own emails so that we can understand each person's position when we have a question?
Well, you can always send us your question directly. I can say that EPA and DOH really have been working collaboratively for the most part. So when Amy says that EPA and DOH is working together, I would trust that we are working together.
Very quickly, we do not have a contact at DOH to whom we are sending our questions. We don't know who to send the questions to from the CRI.
Is there someone that you would recommend?
Me.
or our communications director.
Okay.
You can send it to Joanna or our communications director, Stephen Downs.
I'll get your emails after this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So I have a question for the DOH, and just wondering, do you folks so the Navy takes their own does their own testing. Do you folks do your own testing for the drinking water as well? And then, so if the Navy comes out with a detection, will you do your own independent testing, or is it all relying on the Navy?
We
testing?
have done our own independent testing.
Okay.
We can't do as many tests as obviously the Navy is doing. But EPA now is going to be taking, like I said, in the extended drinking water, they're going to be taking split samples. So.
And have you folks been working with the swarm team on the drinking water? Is that how was there any kind of collaboration in there? I'm sorry, we don't even know who some of the members are.
Yeah.
So they won't tell us who's on the swarm team.
So some of the DOH team were present at their meetings to provide some input, but ultimately it was a Navy document.
Yeah, and the Navy submitted the document indicating that we were part of the team, which we were not, but also we had some issues with the what was it called, the
invalidation
tech memo, the tech memo. We had some issues with the tech memo.
So will you make a statement to that effect, or does the tech memo stand?
We will be.
Yeah, we will be. We're working on a press release.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we have one question from the public about basically following up on your point about how it's ultimately there's the landlord, there's like the government level of helping you with contamination, and then there's the landlord level of helping a homeowner with or a resident with contamination. So this resident would like to have the hot water heater tested and, if needed, replaced. And then both the Navy and the private company Greystone that runs their housing are refusing to do that. Do you have recommendations or suggestions on who they appeal to next? Like, what is the next option?
I don't know what your lease agreement what the lease agreement says.
Yeah, it's okay. All right, so it's based on what the lease says, and it would be like a landlord-tenant litigation situation. Okay, all right, thank you. Go ahead. Yeah.
On the drinking water thing, did you guys, we don't have an incident specific parameter. Do we have an action level, or what is the TPH level that is considered acceptable?
For the new extended drinking water?
Yeah, we were at 206 parts per billion. Have we lowered it? Have we done anything?
Yeah, Roger has lowered it. Lauren, do you remember the number now?
Yeah, but it's not the incident specific parameter. That's a drinking water thing. So that'd be Dennis. Roger did lower the EALs for TPH for groundwater and groundwater as a potential drinking water source. So the action level for middle distillates is 91 parts per million now. But I don't think that it translates to an incident specific parameter. I believe that's something separate for the long-term drinking water program, and
So-
Dennis would have to
Right.
answer that.
Thanks. There isn't an incident-specific number now, and I understand maybe you can address this, Joanna, that I believe the extended drinking water plan, if there is any detection, they will go to forensic, is
Correct.
what I understand.
Yes. So
And what does that mean?
Forensic meaning that they are going to do a deeper dive and dig deeper into finding out what it is that they are seeing in the result. So they are going to be looking for what we keep calling the petrogenic, the petroleum-based, or the organic, biogenic.
Okay, so
think that's
when
all
the
right.
Navy comes out and tells people that the water is safe, that's not correct? Let me put it to you this way. You know the water samples at AMR? They're in the 100, 115, 150 parts per billion range. So if the new level is, let's say, 91, all that water is not, does
This
not
is
meet the
so that's
That's
different.
different.
The 91 is an action level for groundwater that was
For environmental.
right. It's not
Yeah,
for the
so
drinking water.
I guess what I'm asking, we don't know what the drinking water one is, or it's going to be.
I don't think there's going to be a number. It's going to be, if there is any detection, they will go.
Investigate further.
Investigate further.
So in some ways, I feel like it's a little more protective because it doesn't matter what
Number it
what
is.
number they get. If there shows a detection of TPH, then they're supposed to do further investigation. I think the open question is what happens at that point, right? Like I'm a little concerned about the length of time it takes from the time that you have a detection and you go through this forensic analysis and then like what actions are taken, right?
Yeah,
So-
the forensic analysis does take a lot of time.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
When does the long-term drinking water plan end? Or
It
It
ended
End of
ended.
March.
It ended
February.
already.
End
It
of March.
oh,
That's
so
why-
So now
that's
they're
what
doing
it
thought
the
it was gonna be
extended one. Now
extended.
they're doing the extended.
The end-
one.
oh yeah, yeah.
extended,
Okay,
yeah,
so when
sorry.
does that end?
It's
Extended.
1 year
For
till
just 1
April.
year?
Yes.
Okay, so when that ends, then this additional level of protection ends as well, like in terms of testing, like if what
Oh,
you
I
just
see what
said.
you're
Is it
Yeah,
is that right?
Well, I mean, it could be extended again.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then sorry, one more question. The forensic. So who's doing that? Is that an independent contractor? Is the Department of Health doing that, or is the Navy contracting someone?
The Navy will likely be contracting somebody to do that forensic testing for them.
Okay, thank you.
There are a lot of contractors involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Tara.
I have a couple of questions. First, I want to address the question that came in from the public asking landlord.
Yes.
All that. So first, I want to back up just a bit to clarify something that I said earlier. So the Navy actually isn't my landlord. I live on Hickam. All of the housing on base is privatized. So my actual landlord is a privatized company, and then I live on base on the Navy water line. So I get almost like this privileged attention because I am a military family. The Navy will respond to households like mine. So just the distinction, like technically the only thing that the Navy is to me as far as water is concerned is my utility, not my landlord. And I bring that up to clarify because the question that is being raised by the public, I actually raised during the last FTAC meeting because I wanted my water heater looked at. Now, I had gone around and around with my actual landlord, Hickam Communities and the Navy, and both were refusing and saying it was the other one who should be checking my water heater. And I had maintenance in my home several times. It was a couple of months long fiasco. So when I asked the question at the FTEC meeting, Captain Sullivan committed to checking my water heater, and they did come. But it was a Navy responsibility because the Navy's water is what potentially, could have damaged the appliance that my landlord is to supervise. So I was also at I'm going to segue a little bit. I was at the meeting last night, the open house, and it was made very clear by a lot of the answers by the people who did the open house that these meetings are watched by the military and by the EPA. And so even though you're not here tonight, I know you're watching. So Captain Sullivan, could you please address the question of these water heaters that are over in Capilina? Because as a privileged military spouse, I recognize that I do get attention by the military, and I am thankful that you guys came and looked at my water heater and flushed it and did all the testing before, during, and after the flushing. But that needs to happen on the entire water line. So Amy Miller and Captain Sullivan, if you could please get back to us and address that, I would appreciate it for the Capilina residents.
Thank you. And also, I got a text message regarding the, so just to backtrack just a little bit, regarding the groundwater monitoring, if it's possible to also share results as you get them with, subject matter experts and, Board of Water Supply, people who need to know, not necessarily general public, because I understand that at some point we're not going to have the expertise to be able to really, it needs to be interpreted for us first, right? So, but in terms of the key people who are going to be involved in delivering water, I think that would be, it'd be good to include people like that. Thanks.
We'll take that back.
All right. Okay. So we need to get to air quality.
Yes, please.
So let's. We've got 20 minutes. What I'm going to propose is that we go ahead and do public testimony at 7 per usual, and then if we have time, we can come back to the rest of the agenda. All right. Okay. So let's pivot to air quality monitoring. So I will start with saying that I, spent some time at the open house last night learning more about the air quality monitoring. They have several air quality monitors that are set up. It's only on the Red Hill property, the facility property. It's not out in the community at all. That was a concern for me. So each tank has an air intake, so they would be forcing air into the tank, and then that air would come out. There's only one stack that it comes out of. That's kind of sort of in the middle. So that gave me a little more comfort because they only have one point source to monitor in theory. I don't know. I don't know. Couldn't it seep up from the ground? I don't know. They didn't know the answer to that question. So they are going to be keeping track, monitoring that one stack where it was not lost on me how much they emphasize worker safety, which is important. We're not going to let anybody into the tanks until they've been vented. But that also gives me pause to be like, so what they're venting is very toxic, and we're relying on the trade winds basically to protect people. And personally, I was concerned because while the people that I spoke with were knowledgeable, and I am grateful for their nerdiness, like the nerds are going to save us, I also need to know that they didn't know the names of the communities downwind from Red Hill, and that bothers me. So anyway, so they have these little yellow, they're not little, they're like a walkie-talkie, like old school 1990s walkie-talkie. And it can detect any kind of air pollutant. They use hand sanitizer as an example. And these things can text you. They can text and email directly. So, but they won't be texting us directly, no. Sorry, to get your hopes up. They are hoping and begging that Civil Defense, the Hawaii Civil Defense, HAIMA, will allow them to use their notification system, right? So people sign up for their cell phones. They have their own warning systems that Civil Defense uses. So the Navy has asked that in the event they have some sort of trigger, and they validated it, that HIEMA will help them to notify the area residents. And that's the basics of what I've learned from the air quality monitoring. And I also want to note, because we need to give ourselves some credit, the air quality monitoring issue was brought up by us, right? Like, we were the ones that highlighted that. And because of that, I really appreciate the Department of Health taking action to add more requirements. So I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, kudos to you, because we at the last CRI meeting, we heard your concerns about air quality. We required it as part of the closure plan to include a air monitoring plan. There was a little bit of kerfuffle, but I think we're all on track. And I'm going to ask Joanna to explain the plan, if you can.
So part of the plan is for the Navy to provide us with a model. And the model was to show that they could meet certain exposure duration levels that we've identified to them based on different sources of references for these different levels. We have acute, subchronic, and chronic types of limitations that they need to follow. And it'll be for a total volatile organic compounds, benzene, and naphthalene. These will be collected at that discharge point that you mentioned. And they did identify the additional monitoring stations, which are going to be on the Red Hill property near the.
So I did bring that up because I said, I am familiar with the community's concern about air quality. And so I did bring that up as to whether they're going to put monitors in the community. And the answer was that was no, but it's because they felt that it was they couldn't control it. It was exposed to the activities of that community. In other words, there could be trucks or cars or people smoking or smoking meat and all of those things that could cause the air quality to some sort of spike of
pHs,
benzene and all of that. And but what they did say was they're going to monitor, with the model, they will monitor at the edge of their property if it is getting close to being high, they're going to stop their activity. So we're still discussing, but that's where and we didn't agree on a plan yet. Mm-hmm. So everything's in flux, but that's kind of the real time information that we have.
Question. They had 50 or so monitors around the community so they could get a baseline. So it seems to me that they could still put those around the community. They already have the baseline. So if it goes above that, I would think that would be something unusual. They have the baseline. Wasn't that the purpose of the baseline?
Okay.
The ventilation requirements. We're using different terms, right? Ventilation, air quality monitoring. The whole idea is that they're going to degas or vent the tanks. They're going to dump stuff in the air that can cause exposures, but it can also create a fire hazard, which we already have in the area. So there's two things to consider: fire hazard and also the exposures to the people and stuff. So we got some answers from them day before yesterday, or it might have been yesterday. Anyway, they're looking at 15 to 50 parts per million by volume. And they're using a NIOSH standard, which is an occupational safety and health standard, which does not really apply to residents. They're looking at a 10-hour exposure versus people who live in homes for a lot longer than 10 hours at a time. So they came up with this number, and that's their target that they're going to discharge. So my comments right now is we shouldn't be discharging anything, or at the very least, what we're going to monitor is the minimum detectable level of that PID or that instrument that they had that they showed us. Okay, so that PID is a very sensitive instrument. It can detect all kinds of stuff. But they're going to put a stack up between the air monitoring stations in the valley. I think, Rosalie, if you can put that picture up that I sent, if you have it. But in any event, they're going to be monitoring what they discharge. My point is, why are they discharging anything? They can control it from inside the tank. So when we look at this stack, it's about, I think it's 10 or 15 feet above the ground. We have stack monitors that we've had for the last 50 years for all kinds of industries. Why aren't we putting a stack monitor on that stack that will tell them what they're discharging? And the idea is we're not going to discharge 50 to 150 parts per million. So control it from inside the tank, control it before you discharge it. So what we're monitoring is the fact that we're not getting anything outside. This picture that we showed up there, there's 2 dots right dead center.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show
I see
you.
them.
I think
Oh, he's gonna Vanna White it. Okay.
this is supposed to be where their stack is. And this is where the regular tunnel used to ventilate. But from here, and this is the downwind side, right? See all the homes down here? We have a fire down there in this path. How do we get firefighters in there? Fire equipment. And how are these people gonna get notified way early, or is it gonna be too late? So
What's above?
That's the prison.
above here,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think this is the AMR area up there.
so that's Red. This is the rest of Red Hill this way, right? And then that.
That's the tank.
Yeah.
The
So
tank.
This is where they're gonna put the stack.
Yeah.
To the left above is the, I think the prison.
Right. Yeah. So the white collection of buildings, up paper from the yellow line is the prison, which is another that's a specific community, a captivated community, to not put it too lightly. What kind of exposure are they being put to? And just in my question and answer with the representatives last night, they hadn't notified the prison that this was going on. So I would like to ask that they notify them.
So I was in a meeting with Admiral Barnett this morning, and his team is reaching out to the prison, and they're going to put a monitor at the edge of the Navy's property and the beginning of the prison.
Look at that! They took our feedback.
Right.
Yes.
One other
Right.
thing, Kathy, ask them to provide a fire management plan
Sure.
for their whole work. I mean, it's something they should have done earlier, but again, in that is a notification to us, notification to the Hawaii Emergency Command Center, because again, it's getting in there is going to be difficult to fight fires, and what we're worried about is all of those people, and I forgot about the prison. The prison is on that other side.
Yeah. Could you find out about the option of putting something on the stack itself so that we could catch it before it actually gets out?
Sorry.
I think
You mean
that's
a flare?
No,
A
just
monitor?
Yeah.
A
What is-
monitor?
What are the words for the thing on the stack? The coaster on top of the stack?
The emission control device for emission stack monitoring.
That thing.
Oh, you're asking for a flare?
No,
Not a flare? Okay.
They should have
Emission
one.
stack
I mean,
monitor.
it's just,
Okay.
they're not really expensive. I mean, they're spending a lot of money on other stuff. But the stack monitor will tell them what they're discharging. But they should already, like I said, those tanks, we can dilute the area. We can make sure that we're discharging clean air. And the other thing is filtration. They're not putting a filter in their system. And I don't know why. They're saying there's no reason to. But there's tons of reason. There's all this corrosion products inside the tanks.
Are there
I
any
have a
schools
question
nearby?
comment.
Red Hill
Downwind.
Elementary.
Not downwind.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, there are schools or no?
I mean,
There is.
Red Hill Elementary
All
School.
the way down from
Yeah.
Halava into Salt Lake.
Red Hill Elementary.
I mean, so my understanding of the way the wind blows there, right? Because it's a ridge that goes up like this, so it blows straight down from. I don't know how to describe this to people, but like if this is the top of the hill, right, and these are, and I'm the tanks, right? The wind is blowing over it, right, and the prison is here, and the rest of the Wanalua communities are down here.
May I say something?
Yeah.
I want you to understand Mauna Loa Valley because I lived there 30 years. Those winds are kind of just like what happened in Lahaina. It's like a cyclone. There's no day that you can predict that the wind will stay going the same way that it started in the morning. So I explained that to somebody last night. I can't remember who, because they were talking about expecting the wind to, go a certain way, but not in Halava Valley and not in Mauna Loa Valley. It's two different worlds in there compared to outside. So I just want to make that clear, that on camera, that there's an illusion that wind goes one way, and that's just an illusion. You can never guarantee what way that wind is going to be. So the fire hazard and the wind and the air quality, all of that goes together. And I just wanted to kind of wrap it up. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say one thing? Yeah. We had a workshop about TPH and exposure, and we had two chemists, and they were telling us that you can actually ingest TPH by drinking it, or and by breathing. And they said, and this is from experts, I'm not a chemist at all, that even a small amount of constant exposure to TPH long term. So if they're living in these homes and they're being long term exposed, and I don't know how long this they're going to be letting out these vapors. Long term exposure is a real thing. It can be very small. So and when I'm hearing about this, I'm thinking about these things that these chemists had shared, and it's online. You can watch the workshop about TPH and how you can ingest it. And my main concern would be the schools, and how if the schools were informed, any school that's within within that area, I think should be informed, and there may be a little bit more in-depth research into that. Yeah. Because these kids are going to be sitting in a classroom for 8 hours. And if there are vapors coming down from this stack and they're breathing it in, even if it's just a little bit, that exposure could make them sick. And that I learned from the workshop that we all hosted last month. Thank you.
Okay, so just noting the time, but I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
3 minutes.
Okay, Mandy,
sorry, I wish the military was here so we could,
yeah,
have them. I know it's not you folks. I again appreciate you are here, but at least you can hear our concerns as well.
And they're watching. Don't worry. You can talk to them. Okay, Mandy, you want to take us out?
Two things. Okay. One, so when everyone knows I went out to Camp Lejeune for a speaking engagement, an event that happened several months ago, right? And there were several subject matter experts who had an invested interest. And there was a gentleman that got up and he spoke, and he's happy to speak here as well. But he spoke about inhalation. And it really spoke to me in my heart, because everyone knows that I'm a mother of a very young child who just turned 4 years old, but he was 13 months old at the time of exposure. My son has permanent lung damage. His child pulmonologist made it clear to us, along with these folks at Camp Lejeune, that you can inhale far more than you can ever consume. So I just want to put that out. The other thing is we had, and I've never been like a public alarmist. I've kept my head pretty much buried in the sand for the entire time that I've been in the military. But what I have learned, that narrative is really all about the lack of transparency. And so I don't want to alarm the public, but I just want people to be informed. So just like we told you all to watch the Camp Lejeune, the public, the greater whole, to watch the Camp Lejeune documentary to see that this isn't the first time that the military has treated a public health and safety concern in this way. I would also ask you, when we were there, we had dinner with our very dear friend, Shannon Bentz, and she told us, watch the movie Downwind. And we keep saying downwind, downwind, downwind. And I just want everyone to watch it. I watched it on the plane on Amazon Prime, and it's called Downwind. And I think everyone heard during the press conference when we got out of trial, I spoke about Red Hills. This is not the first time it happened, right? There's so many toxic exposures, and one of them, it came from the Nevada test site. There's articles out there that talks about, the United States killed John Wayne. And, for those, my mom's a big John Wayne fan, but look up that stuff, because the Nevada test site, it happened at George Air Force Base, where they were doing, I think it was over 900 nuclear test, bombs. And they did not take into consideration the trade winds, like Susan was just talking about. On any given day, it's not gonna be the same one day to the other. Thank you for putting that in there, Rosalie. But look up the Nevada test site, look up George Air Force Base, look about how many people had cancer, this massive cluster, not only John Wayne, but many of the cast and crew who filmed. And these people were 153 miles away from the test site, and they all ended up with cancer. So I would encourage you all not to be a public alarmist, but just what we're talking about and the magnitude of this and how they are doing this without considering it. When you read, it says this expose is about the U.S. or the United States disregard for everyone living downrange. And so I think that's what's happening here, and it's so scary. It's so incredibly scary. And so I just encourage everyone to watch this. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Okay. Yep. Let's move to public testimony. We have people in the audience want to testify. Susan, would you like to present your slides? And then if there are people online who would like to testify, say so in the chat. Yeah, Rosalie, can you put up Susan's slides, please?
Yep. Which slide, Susan?
Can you start up with the flow chart?
The flow
Gotcha.
chart. Okay.
I just got to say, Mandy is so cool. She was really good at the whole trial. She held up.
Yeah.
She's a tough woman.
All right, there's
She's a softie.
A lot of things over the past 2 years, Susan. This is the first time I've been called cool. Thank you.
So today, can you make it a little bit larger on the slide? So I forgive me, but I just finished these at 3:30, or else you all would have gotten copies. However, I emailed it to everybody so that maybe you'd want to follow along with me.
Yeah, and we'll post it on the website.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, okay. So I switched from drinking water because I wanted to also understand the groundwater monitoring wells, the aquifer and the Red Hill shaft, and how they relate, okay? So, and for us to understand that everything works together, and understanding what the monitoring wells do and how they monitor the aquifer, then how you get the drinking water, and the whole shaft thing, not shafted, but shaft. So the groundwater wells, and you can read, but the P wells are the plume wells. Those wells give the opportunity of actually showing if the plume is spreading, okay, whichever way it's going. Disclaimer, I am not an expert on this yet. So my drinking water expertise is far higher than this. And then the Sentinel monitoring monitors out there in Mauna Loa and Halava Valley away from the shaft. And then I show how the aquifer provides water to the Red Hill drinking water shaft, but the wells are also monitoring what's in the aquifer, which ends up with everything supposed to be cleaned up by the Navy in the year 2000, whatever. But if you follow this, you can understand how the water also gets to the shaft, but also simultaneously, the wells are being monitored for contaminants. And I put down here, just because both shafts were closed, the water had already reached the water system. And in the Navy's, I want to say closing comments, but what they kept trying to say was the shaft was closed, so therefore nobody was still getting any of the contaminated water. And the shaft was not closed immediately, so the water had already gone through the distribution system for at least 7 days, and they were drinking it. Closing off the shaft certainly stopped the water from flowing, but then the next day it was accidentally turned back on. And then several days later, the Iea Halava shaft was turned off. So there was still water. It wasn't only Waiava at a certain point until they actually turned it off. And what wasn't clearly made clear to everybody, except for, of course, those drinking the water, was that there was stuff in the pipes. The stuff had gone through the pipes, and those of you who have heard me talk, there were slugs in the pipes. Everybody did not get contaminated at the same time with the same amount of everything because of the way the pipes run. I'm not going there today. But what I did want to show you was the groundwater monitoring wells that I happen, you could go to the wells now, Rosalie. The first 4 wells are going to be from 2021, and they're the wells that I have found the most exceedances. So I'm not even looking at detections anymore. I'm not looking at adding up diesel and oil. I'm just looking at all the exceedances in 2021. And I put the map in here and circled the wells that I'll be going over. The first one is, you could go to the next slide. Next slide, okay. This one is Red Hill Monitoring Well 01R. Now remember, this is 2021. This particular well data on the Unsafe Waters website started in October of 21. So I couldn't get anything in the summertime frame. But you can see how it's going up to November, right around that November time frame. Just keep this picture in mind, okay? And I've also used the color codes yellow, diesel, and oil is red. Their limits are higher in the groundwater monitoring. So at the top, it'll tell you what the limits are. So for diesel is 400 and oil is 500, and you can see all of the exceedances. Still 2021, okay? Now go to our HMWO2, which is the problem well. Next slide. Yeah, there it is. Ugh. Okay, so you're going to say, Susan, please help me here. What I found was that all those little colored squares on the bottom, and I've put a legend at the left-hand side. I'm like, what the hell is this? Because I was still only looking for TPH, diesel, and oil. And I said, well, what are these things? Because they're still all exceedances. And you see the naphthalene, I cannot pronounce this stuff correctly. The methylnaphthalene and number 2 methylnaphthalene. What I also sent to you guys was a table of all of these particular contaminants that I found that you can read on your own. I'm not going to go through it and get you all freaked out. So this is from January of 2021. Sorry, you guys need magnifying glasses. All the way up to December of 2021. And then you can see the November time frame. Now, if you look at later on, you're going to look at this and you're going, well, where is that well? That's why I put the map in there, okay? This well is actually right located by tanks 5 and 6. There was a problem with tank 5 in the past. I'm not a historian, so I ain't going there. Okay, the next slide is the monitoring well W03. And it's very interesting how it has exceedances, and then there's this period of time when there's nothing. So for me, the nothing is they weren't testing then. I do not believe that if you look at this, that all of a sudden in October all the way to December, there was no detections. Yeah. I just think that there were no tests. Okay, next page. Remember, I'm not the expert right now. I'm just giving you my ideas. So now we're going 2022, the exact same wells. Okay? And I had put a map in between there just so you wouldn't have to go back and forth if you print it out. And I come across this contaminant called benzoanthracene, and you can also see that its limit is 0.029. And you know, we think these are just small little amounts, but when I listen to our PFAS lady and how just really teeny billions of millions, or however she said that.
1 million billion.
Thank you.
Sounds like
I
a
wrote that
thing
down.
from a cartoon, yes.
So in here, you're going to see all the exceedances, again, TPH, diesel, and oil. Now, as far as quenching, I'm just trying to bring this out now since they decided to tell us that quenching screwed up their drinking water labs. Well, let's see how you're going to explain this. Go to next page. This is a killer on your eyes. See where the next one. Don't tell me. There should be one right after that.
That is. Yes, it is.
There it is. Okay. Now that goes from January 2022. So this is already after the spill. And I got it going all the way till April 2024. Now that question mark, I cannot explain that. But if you just go a little bit past the question mark, moving to the right, it's getting into the area where the spill happened in November. I won't try to make a correlation because, like I said, I don't understand all of this yet. But as you move on to June of 2022, all of a sudden, the colors, the red blocks, which is oil, the yellow blocks, which is diesel, and then the other three colors, in addition to benzoanthracene, all of that stuff starts to disappear. What was I told last night? When I wrote pattern, see above that where it says pattern, and now all you're seeing is diesel? I asked, well, where'd all that other stuff go? Board of Water Supply, can you guess where they told me where all these other detections went, like the oil and the naphthalene? Can you just guess what the EPA might have told me?
Just tell us.
Yep.
We're on 9 minutes. Go for it.
Algae, eating it, microorganisms are starting to get rid of all of that stuff.
In that short a period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I just listened last night because I'm practicing with you guys. Okay. So the end story is, of course, this particular well. And also how important it is to have groundwater monitoring that is consistently explained to the public in a way that they can understand it. As Kathy mentioned earlier, weekly measurements. To understand the groundwater, you got to go back to the flow chart, and then you got to start talking to the experts. I haven't had time to do that. But if you go to the second to last slide, RHMW 2254 dash, not that, that's the surprise slide. That's this, no, one before, okay. You're gonna see this Indeno 123-CD pyrene, and then the top one is Dibbins AH anthracene. Those were not seen in any of the other wells that you just saw, okay? Now you got to remember, I didn't show any of these color-coded pink, green, blue in 2021, okay? That wasn't showing up in 2021. This is 2022 up until now. And the very last one has to do with the P wells. The P wells are the plume wells. I only got one data point in 2024, and that was February 14th. And, you know, you can say, Susan, what does that mean? Well, only thing I can tell you is they detected 1,170 parts per billion when it's only supposed to be 400 of the diesel, and the oil is 777 when it's only supposed to be 500. Okay, that was a surprise slide, but I do have to give you, go back one more to WO2. Right there. Can you all read the last date? The last date on that line?
April 1st.
Whoever can see it.
April 1st? Like it's a joke?
Who can see it?
April 1st.
April 1st, what year?
2024.
Okay, that's my point.
That it's current, that this
Yeah.
is currently happening. Thank you very much.
And it's all exceedances. It's not detections, or else this would be all mishmash, okay?
Thank you very much,
I appreciate the time.
Yep.
And I will be doing more research. And if Department of Health has anything to add, please do. Thank
Susan,
you.
where did you get your data from? Just
Unsafe waters.
okay, got it.
So
Thank
for
you, Susan.
Susan, I will always use their website with their data, so that I don't use yours, because I don't have really. The Navy is the one that's responsible for this water. They're going to put something out on a website, then they better be able to answer to some of the questions. Okay? Thank you. Sorry
Speaking
for
of
taking
questions,
so long.
we have many more. So we have 2 people in person to testify, and then we have at least we have 2 people online so far.
I just have a quick question.
Go for it.
Joanna, I hope that you can answer this. So I just got results back for the new monitoring, and in that testing, it actually says on the test that for the total petroleum, the hydrocarbons, it was 266. And I was also told that they used the chromatograms, like in a summary, that it was non-detect. So I'm a little confused as to why the level was 266 again. And the non-detect doesn't make any sense to me, because that's a high. That was the high levels. Can you speak to that at all?
Not right now, but if you could share that with me, then
Okay.
I will send
I'll
it
get your
over
email
to our team
and send it to you. Okay,
Yes.
thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, go.
Hello.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, is the Red Hill well coming back online? And if so, when would that happen?
Red Hill Shaft?
Mm-hmm.
It's not coming online anytime soon.
Okay.
It's-
Would it be?
It will come back on after it has a treatment system. So there is a treatment system that is being planned that the Navy is working on, and sharing with the department on their plans.
But again, it's not going to be
Not
anytime
anytime
soon.
I know we talk a lot about samples and what's testing here and what's testing there. We know something is wrong with the water. Are we going to do more to help address people's health concerns in a real way that can bring relief?
Well, we're trying, we're listening, we're here, listening to your
Yes,
concerns.
thank you.
We're doing investigation. We're trying to, we're collaborating with our, with EPA in trying to figure out the issue. So,
Because when
we
we
are
look
committed.
when we look at people presenting with medical conditions, we need to immediately act in order to prevent short and long-term harm. And so as we're moving through this, we really need to start doing more to address the medical concerns.
So the medical concerns is not, sorry, it's not Department of Health.
Okay.
It's not our.
I just wanted to ask, as we're working through the contamination, because we know something's wrong with the water. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to online. We've got Chris to go first.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I had to write my question down because I nearly forgot. Hold on a moment. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. You can hear you. Can she see me?
Okay. Okay, there we go. So I have just a couple questions. One, what options are there to help or assist the Navy in updating their notification system to their utility users so that it's not done via landlords or just a media or something of that nature? I mean, because when you're on any other utility company, you get a much better notification there's a water problem or something to be aware of. But in their case, somehow you pay them every month, but you don't get a phone call. But if you don't pay the bill, you get a phone call. So why can't utility users just get a phone call to warn them of anything? Be aware not to use while we investigate, or the things that basically when there's a water main burst, I've seen just a year ago or whatever, they still used a really inadequate way to notify all users of their utility. And I didn't see any updates since the December spill that was any different. So I wondered what options there are or what power does the DOH have to enact protocols when you have a water utility company, but it happens to be a Department of Defense, but they're just a water utility company because in this case, they provide to public and public people who didn't sign up for military. So, and schools and public entities and the Honolulu airport. So I'm just wondering what are those things that you can do to help assist to get that notification system much, much better and not convoluted and complex.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I hear what you're saying.
So that was question one.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, and it's probably very frustrating, but the Department of Health doesn't have any mechanisms or protocols to require a utility to notify. Just as Board of Water Supply, when they have a water main break and, we get it on the news as well. So we just, we don't have any mechanism to require them to notify you in any quicker way than they're already doing, or not. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I just thought there was regulations for that.
That's for those types of situations. So for boil water notices and such, then there is regulation. So they're
Pretty sure there was regulation that if something's wrong with the water, that they, under a Clean Water Act, they have to notify the users. And you can't notify users just by media. You have to actually notify the users.
Sorry, I was keying in on your statement of, when there's a water main break and those kinds of things. When there is a we do issue brown water boiled water advisories. We do issue those things.
the water purveyor.
I
though.
don't know if we could. The military should do that for you if it is a brown water. If it's not a brown, if it is a boiled water advisory.
Yeah, and Chris, you're right. That even the Department of Defense itself has a policy that says, if there's an unknown if the contaminant in the water is unknown, then they're supposed to notify everyone receiving that water to not drink it. So they're not following their own procedures, and we are struggling, the broader community, to figure out how to hold them accountable for following their own rules.
But they won't even show up to their own.
Yeah.
Well, along with that, they admittedly, even last night, they have a system that's much more effective for notifying military families, but there's a failure when it comes to notifying those who are not in the military. And so the Capelina homes, again, are this underserved community because they're not military. And so that was something that even some of the comments about last night when I was asking about the air quality monitoring, they were talking about how easy it is for them to notify military families, but they're having to come up with creative, out-of-the-box ways to notify those who are not affiliated with the military. And I think that there needs to be some sort of oversight or regulation that would mandate no partiality to the communities that they serve.
And yet, I think you have to note that even though it's so easy for them to notify military families, they didn't. And that's why we're all sitting here right now.
Yes. Yes.
So that's not been fixed
But
for
even,
anyone.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. I guess my add to that is it's not just people in their homes. They provide water to public locations, the next mall, people that work at a Taco Bell, people that work in the airport. How would they know? And I thought, because they pay a bill, there's going to be somebody noticed on that bill when that bill's not paid. So they have a full list of utility customers. So there's a way to contact. So I just didn't know why that wouldn't be used, or some enforcement from another entity to tell them they have to notify the users. And you can't just rely on telling the news.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my first one, and that's a big concern. And I would hope that you all at least encourage, if you have zero power, to tell a utility company to tell them that they have to notify users when there's any issue with the water, then at least do meetings to help assist them in updating their notification system. Does the Navy have approval to reuse the tanks? And did they just throw the survey away? Did they discard the survey that they did that was really overwhelming to not reuse old tanks? I have a very big concern with their public notices lately about cleaning tanks, clean. They're going to use verbiage, and I think that's to do what they want to do in the future, which is to reuse the facility, which should be closed down under the order, and it should be decommissioned and not reused. So I just have a concern, and is that something that's already been approved in the background?
So the plan has not been approved, and the order says to decommission. So they are going to be removing pipelines leading from the tanks, and of course it could, who knows what's going to happen in the future, but
I think that decision hasn't been made yet.
Yeah.
But I definitely got the vibe at the open house last night that they were, talking about, options for reusing. But it wasn't a thing that had been decided yet. It was just speculation.
We know they want to save money, so I thought it was they're really going to push it behind the scenes to have the regulators approve their reuse plan. And I thought it was well known that nobody wants that. It's only the Navy that wants that to save money. So I was just thinking, did they get that approved, or is that really in the mix of even an option when it really shouldn't be an option? Because the order is to shut down and not reuse something that held fuel, and not, I mean, there really should be a shutdown. So I just thought, I don't care if a pipe is cut off, the tank should not be reused. The tank should be shut down. And I mean, it's inert material or really, really decommissioned in a way that's not reusable. So I think they're working around it and really trying to use their mental warfare. That's just, they know how to word, they know how to enact power, even amongst the EPA, and they know what they're doing. So it's just be careful. I'm just telling DOH and other entities to be careful and to be inquisitive and to not be led by them, but really actually push back on them a little bit, because they'll always try to lead. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we've got Tara Rojas.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so can you hear me? Okay.
Okay, maybe we can't hear you. Try it again.
Hello? Okay,
Hello.
let me try again.
Oh, they're better.
Yeah, okay. Okay, now.
Okay, yeah. So for the water, last night they said, or as I was listening to y'all today, I was wondering if maybe the community could do testing of their water together, and with the results appear at one of their Navy community events, because when asked, to provide water for the community, and y'all said that they stated themselves that their water levels are safe, that's why they will not be providing water. So that was an idea to kind of bring them en masse, the results, to force them to provide water for the communities affected. And so that was one thing. And two, they did mention as an example of why they would not be providing water, because according to the testing level saying being safe, they said that, for example, would BOW, I know DOH are there, but they said, would BOW, provide water buffaloes? And the point I was trying to make to them is that if there's any concern at all, provide out of abundance of caution, right? And the fact that there are families coming, forward and saying they are being affected, regardless of your testing, your results. And so I just want to know, is that true? So I couldn't speak on behalf of Board of Water Supply, but I'm pretty sure, they would, out of abundance of caution and concern for the community, provide water buffaloes. So I wanted to know if you have any information you can provide on that. And they said, finally, that if they did provide water buffaloes, it would just be from the same contaminated water source. So I was thinking about, why would they not look for an alternate water source to provide, in the water buffaloes? And where would be the alternate water sources to provide clean water from? So just a thought. I was listening to the meeting today, and they said also regarding the water, they only reached out to Haima yesterday, Wednesday, regarding communication, like Tara was saying, to alert the community in the event that they need to rapidly, get the notice out. So they only reached out to Haima yesterday, Wednesday, and they haven't received the response yet. So that was regarding water. And then the air, I just have the points here that somebody who does know about, cleaning up, they said they actually have the technology out there and the money to clean up the water in addition to the air. And when they asked on the live if air scrubbers would be using, and they responded that no, this is for air quality monitoring. They said that no, they're not. But the issue is that pretty much the person that knows, they said they would just be dispersing, in other words, a toxic, unsafe, dangerous fumes air, instead of, capturing it, in case, again, their pumping in system and vacuuming it out, is faulty. So if that gets out, like I know as y'all were saying, just even in minute amounts, continuously, then that is, a really big concern for health. And they also said that they do not have a measurement for outside safe levels of air quality, which seems kind of strange, but they said that they don't have anything to measure the outside air, only inside the tanks. So that's a concern right there. That seems kind of, crazy. And they do not have plan Bs in place yet. And finally, they do not have the contract yet in place, for the next step, of course, which is removing the fuel from the elbows. And I just wanted to say lastly, I could say it first, I forgot, but Navy EPA, if you are watching, then that means you can be there. So no excuses. Mahalo.
Thank you, Tara. Okay, next up is Catherine McCallahan.
Yeah. Y'all can hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to first of all, thanks to the Hawaii Department of Health for being there. I wanted to ask y'all a question, and it has to do with congressional hearings regarding Camp Lejeune. I can't remember the exact date of them, sometime in the earlier 2000s. It's called Looking Back, Moving Forward, and basically having experts on what went wrong at Camp Lejeune and what lessons could be learned moving forward to not have that repeated, that tragedy. And so I was particularly interested, Lauren, I think Lauren from Hawaii Department of Health.
Yes.
But particularly Hawaii Department of Health, because one of the water experts spoke during those congressional hearings, and he commented about the fact that it was broadly known among regulators that the Marines were very delinquent and delayed in test result reporting to regulators, and that often by the time they received those results, any repeat testing might have missed surges, and they would comment that, oh, well, we repeated and we didn't see it. And that apparently went on for decades. So first of all, are y'all aware that that was a pattern discovered and understood was a cause of part of what Camp Lejeune had happened to them?
Sorry, no, I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. So I guess that was one of my concerns tonight, as talking about working into the working plan about, I think, is it Lauren? I feel bad if I'm missaying your name.
It's Lauren. Talking
about y'all were not pleased with the time period and you would like to see rapid results. So I guess I'm just urging you, those congressional hearings are easy to find. It's just called Camp Lejeune, Looking Back, Moving Forward. I think his name is Mr. Hargrove, but I may be mistaken on that. But I'm very concerned about that because I think a lot of what we see in water results over the last couple of years indicates that there tends to be surges. And was it my understanding that you all have had issues with the Navy reporting results timely? Didn't that occur after the May leak, that there was a significant delay getting the groundwater results to Hawaii Department of Health?
I don't recall if that was the time period, but I do know there were some times.
Okay, all right. Well, so I appreciate if y'all would consider that for your observing and prompt test results. I think that is kind of a hard pill to swallow to know that that pattern is still repeating today. But that's all I have. Thank y'all for being there again today.
Thank you. Okay.
I have a question, for Department of Health. So do you folks take an oath of office when you guys... No, you don't.
I don't. As civil service, I don't. I don't
Do you,
know if she does.
I was just wondering.
You're confirmed for the Senate, right?
No, I'm not. But we do... when I was with the Attorney General's office, we took an oath of office.
I was just wondering because I just wanted to know, how, because I know that the head of the Department of Health is appointed by the governor, and and it's part of his administration. So how political is it, and versus what is, is what is holding, I guess, the line for your department. I'm not saying that you guys are
it's our mission.
Political.
So,
but I'm just saying that top down, it's very political.
So our mission is to protect public health and the environment, and we take it seriously, and I know the director does as well. And the governor does. I rarely speak to I don't speak to the governor. I speak to the director of health, but I know he does take this his mission seriously. And the whole reason we started this with the emergency order, it came from Governor Ige, who gave us the okay to issue that emergency order.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have two more online. And how many do we have? Do we have just one? Okay. All right. So we'll do the other two online and then we'll finish. Okay. All right. Peggy Wagner. Oh.
Hello.
Hello. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for speaking up about notification. I live in Capilina, and I feel like we're this poor little stepchild that hasn't gotten much attention. We don't get notifications. We pay the Navy for our water. We pay the bill, but they don't tell us anything. And so thank you for that. And on the hot water heater, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I talked to Captain Sullivan last night and the Admiral and the OIC. They're not going to do hot water heaters. Okay. And I'd like to thank Walter for reaching out about safe water and providing water. We have volunteers in our community still who go one Saturday a month to Home Depot. We pay for and collect 75 5-gallon bottles of water and distribute them free to the community, which I'm happy to do. I'm glad to see it, but I think it's just beyond the pale that we have to provide our own safe water to our community. That's all I'd like to say. I love you all. Thank you for what you're doing. You're amazing.
Thank you. Okay, Jamie Simnick.
Thank you, Kathleen Ho and the Department of Health for being there. Just a couple of questions. One, there was groundwater, soil, and vapor sampling that's been done since 2012. There was a public order by the Department of Health released October of 2012, which has been continuing. In January of 2010, were you guys aware that 52 soil vapor monitors, were installed to characterize the spill in the lower tunnel of Red Hill and was also tracking the movement of the contamination? And in December of 2010, 2021, there was diesel methyl naphthalene, naphthalenes, bihaloline, bis, which is 2-ethexyl and phthalate. Are you guys testing for those, or are those, especially the last three, are those on the list of chemicals that we would be testing for? Because the vapor intrusion is very much real. There's data that goes all the way back showing that it's also coming up from the concrete slabs.
Can you say the chemical names again?
There's BIS, BIS, 2-ETHYLHEXL, which is PHTHALATE,
okay,
and then BIPHENYL. And those were detected in December 10th of 2021, as well as diesel D and gasoline TPHG. And the diesel was way, 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 way over the 400 parts per billion within the 6 digits.
So I'm not familiar with that. Did you get it from a report or a study?
Yes, a report.
What was the name of the report?
I can't release that.
Okay.
Okay. We'll ask our team.
Would you be able to send us, Jamie, the list,
list.
Whatever information you can share from that report, so that we can help to try to triangulate that information? I didn't know about that.
But most importantly, with the 52 soil vapor monitoring systems that were installed by January 10th of 2022 in the Red Hill tunnel.
We know that.
It was in the lower tunnel to characterize the spill and to track how the aquifer was being affected. Has the Department of Health been made aware of that? Because at the open house last night, the Navy kept stating they know how to remediate these systems because they've had major spills like this. Most notably, what's going on right now is Cape Hatteras, the secret sub base, which I brought that up last night, and they were aware of it. And Ing and I forget the other gentleman's name, but they're pushing the blame back on the Department of Health. So are you guys being given all of the accurate information, and are you tracking it? But we're also going, this has been going on for years and decades.
Jamie, do you want to send?
In 2012, it was going back.
Jamie, can you send the list of chemical names, and then we can add them to the list we were asking about earlier?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But with Kathleen Ho, I really want to know, because they were, Dr. Brewer was tracking the soil, the groundwater, and the vapors going all the way back to 2012. There's published reports. There's DOH guidance letters that are being sent out to the state. And this has been ongoing, but we're acting as if this is the first time any of this is happening.
Okay.
And the Navy's putting the blame solely on the DOH's shoulders.
So Dr. Brewer works for the Department of Health.
Yes.
So
Wait, can you mute that other person, Leslie? Okay, so do you know about the soil vapor monitors?
So I don't know. She mentioned 54 soil vapor monitors. 52. Okay. I don't know the exact number. I do know that there are soil vapor monitors within the tunnel.
Okay.
I do know that.
Okay. All right. And is the Navy reporting the?
I believe we're getting the data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And we'll continue to follow up on those other things you brought up. We have other testimony here in person. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I first want to say thank you, Department of Health, for being here. And I have a concern. I'm not sure who can hear me out, but maybe someone in the Navy region, some far away in some other place. I think it's very problematic to not place any air quality monitors in residential or commercial areas. If these monitors do find high results, then what happens? Will the Navy advise the community that the air is not safe and that the community should then hide out? And I'm assuming from the military's past behavior that they will argue that it is invalidated, or if they do get a notification from these devices, that they would inform the community, maybe days later or maybe after their trial, or tell the regulators that there's contaminants in the air and maybe that it could cause long-term chronic health issues far from when it's important. And I just want to put out there that it's very hard to trust from the community, to trust the Navy to clean up, remediate, and conduct adequate water testing. The Navy and the military are not trained to clean up the mess. They are trained to create one. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Malia, I see you have your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Mahalo. Aloha kako.
Aloha.
Malia ko inoa mai mauna lua mai au. My question is for the Department of Health. I was just, and I may be reiterating Tara or Helani, but I was wondering if they knew that the EPA was not going to be present at today's meeting.
We did know. I reached out to EPA to ask if they were going to be attending, and they said no.
Okay, more of a comment then, as a Kanaka and a resident, is because the EPA created and helped to create the CRI for community transparency, to like, how does that make you feel that the people that created this CRI are not there? Because transparency is needed in something so important in our aina, and it kind of seems not very pono for them to not be present at this meeting.
We're very disappointed. Extremely disappointed. Borderline pissed off.
All right, this is family television, Walter, and bang my gavel. All right, did you want to say something?
Well, I don't want to get into this, but I understand that there is some mediation that's supposed to be taking place, and
it doesn't involve you.
It doesn't involve me.
Yeah, and we could actually, we have a few minutes. We can talk about the mediation for a few minutes, but I do see that there's one more person here who would like to testify. Malia, do you have anything else you wanted to say before? Okay.
Just mahalo. Mahalo for being there, because at least somebody is besides the residents that actually care about this. So mahalo for your time.
Seriously. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Hey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of interesting that the Navy didn't have anyone here today. I'd just like to speak as a volunteer with various community groups that, they're, I guess you can see out in Capulina that there are residents organizing and speaking with each other, as Peggy mentioned, about this issue. And you can see that there are, I know there's also a group which organizes around Pearl City Peninsula as well, I think. Mm-hmm. And there's even a Honolulu-wide, I think maybe even Oahu-wide, tenants union that is kind of growing there too. I think to anyone out there who, if you are a resident on affected water lines, know that there are many other people out there just like you. And if you are concerned about your water, just like many of us are, I think you'll find a lot of support from your fellow community. I think we can deliberate about statistics, about legality, or all the fine details all we want, but at the end of the day, I think that a lot of the support you're going to need to get clean water, to solve all of these issues, to get your water heaters replaced, you're going to need the support of your community. So if you can, please come out and find these groups. There are many, so yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I don't think there's any other public testimony. We do have a few more minutes. I do think it's important for us to talk a little bit about mediation, give everybody an update. So first, we did do a survey during the last meeting, and the overwhelming consensus of that survey was to not mediate. Basically, the public felt that, or the people who participated in the survey felt that the CRI meetings were useful, that the Navy learned stuff from participating in these meetings, EPA learned things, and that there was a serious lack of trust in terms of engaging with Navy in mediation, primarily because there is a requirement for confidentiality. And so anything that we talk about in mediation, we would be expected to not speak about it for 10 years. So, and it's not really clear. So the mediator says that the mediation would be just about the CRI process, but just to give an example how process and content would overlap, I, for one, think that PFAS is within the scope, and I would like for, within the scope of the administrative order on consent that forms a CRI. And I would like to mediate over that and have the Navy answer our questions on PFAS. So if we discuss that in mediation, does that then mean that I am not allowed to talk about PFAS for 10 years? Which that is a compromise I'm not willing to make. So that's just an example of some of the issues that we've been raising. And so I'm sure there are other, you have a few minutes, you guys want to say something? Go ahead, Lacey.
I also agree with that concern. My other concern is that we've had enough trouble as a CRI trying to get answers from the Navy in the times they did show up. And we've had so much trouble that we've had to submit FOIA requests. We have gotten them back, and, you know, there's exemptions for FOIA requests. It goes into trade secrets and commercial confidential stuff. So we kind of see that anything we're looking for now, they lump it into that. And it talks about that exemption for FOIA in the confidential commercial information. And so my concern is that they could pretty much say anything falls under that. And then we would then, again, not be able to talk to the community at all, or perhaps not even be able to talk to our fellow CRI members.
Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, and I do want to point out that 3 of us did have a Zoom with the federal mediator because I really wanted all of these questions answered, and I didn't want to make assumptions. And, you know, some of the things that we found out, there could be no recording, there could be no access to the public. And then this confidentiality was a little bit confusing because I'm looking at the people that are going, you know, that would be involved in this mediation, you know, meeting next week, and they're not the decision makers. So they would have to, from the Navy, they would have to go back to their commanding officer, to their superior, and talk to them about what was discussed. But they wouldn't want us to go back. We report to you. We report to each other as a CRI. And so it, I wasn't, you know, it doesn't quite make sense to me that the Navy would be able to go back to their people and discuss, and we wouldn't. And of course, again, we report to you. We represent you. So I just wanted to let everybody know we really, really thought about this. We asked all the right questions. It just doesn't seem fair to the public to do mediation under their rules.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that we did try, right? Mm-hmm. We did reach out to the mediator to get and collect more information, and we did a public survey. So we did our due diligence on this matter, and it would actually undermine the whole goal of this CRI, which is to provide this space for transparency and information, and it's really, the stakes are too high to go backwards at this point, because we're talking about water.
Yeah.
I think the idea of mediation was never really clearly understood. The reason why there's a dispute is because they want to be able to control this agenda. They want to be able to control what we say, who can say it, and then they don't want to hear from the public. It's embarrassing and shameful for them to listen to people in their command beg and ask them for water. But that's not really a dispute for us. If they have that dispute, it's between them and EPA. And there's a section in the ACO, in the consent order, that tells them how to resolve that. And it's not mediation, by the way. So they go through this process of going from one level to the other, up the chain of command, and they can do whatever they want. For them to not attend meetings and not participate in the CRI while they go off and do their dispute thing is kind of ridiculous. But again, it's an effort to control the public, which was the very concern in the very beginning. The reason why we have the CRI was the public said they didn't trust EPA and they didn't trust the Navy, and they wanted to be able to get public input and public questions and concerns that we could bring up to represent the public. So the mediation was just I don't know what it was other than a distraction. And we've gone through a series of distractions. And the bottom line is today, when we started in October, we were concerned about having water for the families. Today, we're in the same place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things that we were told by the mediator was that we would have to get permission from everyone to release information from whatever is said or whatever information is exchanged in mediation. We were open to mediation if it was made public, if it was a public mediation where we could, take notes at the very least and share those notes. But that wasn't even something that we could do. And we did, again, have a discussion and we researched this. Thank you.
Okay, I see. So Tara has her hand up, Mandy has her hand up, and then Lacey. No. Okay, all right. So let's take Mandy first. Is this on mediation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. And then Chris, I see that your hand is up too. Is it on mediation also? No. Okay. All right. So we'll do this conversation. I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Mandy.
Quickly to caveat what I think I'm echoing. Can somebody mute it? I think it's a stall tactic. It's a control thing. It is a bullying thing. It is, we're not going to allow them to come into the CRI and do a dog and pony show and have all these static displays and read off of the script, because, you cannot have transparency and rebuild trust without authenticity. And it's not authentic to come in and have a script. Like, they were asking for us with these ground rules to have the public, only have 30 minutes and submit their questions beforehand so they can filter them out and have their lawyers and their public affairs people and all this so they can have a script for it. Like, that's not what this is about. That is not how you have an honest, candid conversation. And, as some of the other folks said, we were interested potentially, like, before, to see, and they make it seem like it's all about ground rules. But here's the things that the public needs to know. If this is all about ground rules, we, the CRI, spent an adequate amount of time before the CRI ever kicked off, before we ever had our first meeting, establishing ground rules. And what happened is, when it didn't go their way, when they didn't have the control, they've used anything as a stall tactic. One thing I want to say, how rich is what I want to say. How rich for these federal agencies who, have, Susan could tell you offhand because she tracks them, like over 200 questions that have not been answered. They've no-showed on 3 meetings now. Mediation is not part of the AOC. Coming to these meetings is, and they would rather accept a fine or renegotiate terms unilaterally without us involved, rather than actually showing up for the community. And as a person who, my husband was a lead plaintiff in this trial, and I sat there in Hawaii for the past 2.5 weeks. And, to walk out of court every day, like, these people have been tracking. Our trial date has been set for 7,500 people, have been set for over a year. This trial date has been set. They know that. The Navy knows that. The EPA knows that. It was one of the main excuses as to why they couldn't be so transparent, right? Because there's ongoing litigation. They knew they were tracking this trial. And how disrespectful, and I'll speak for the impacted families who were part of this trial. I have no problem doing that. How disrespectful to have all of these emails about mediation flood our inboxes coming out of court and reading this, to learn that they actually did meet. They met privately on the 1st and the 3rd of May without us involved. It was a unilateral decision. They already had mediation without us, and now they want to invite us at the 11th hour. In addition to that, the Department of Defense and the Navy knew, again, that this trial was going on. And in the same week, they scheduled, Admiral Paparo's assumption of command. Admiral Paparo, the guy who was in charge of this thing, right? Like, who was in charge of failing to warn, the comms plan, all of that. He will now, assume command of the largest combatant command. We had the Secretary of the Navy and the Secretary of Defense in town that week. Another, media stunt, all while this trial is going on. And on the same day that the Navy and the EPA wrote us an email just last week or at the beginning of this week, said, hey, we're not going to attend now the 3rd CRI meeting. They also started advertising this town hall one day prior to our established CRI meeting. And, we have done the due diligence to find location because they've renegotiated and not showed up 3 times now. So, last night on the live, Sherry Ng, which don't even get me started on that lady, but, is saying, well, they won't even let us pick the dates and agenda items and this and that. Well, you've not shown that you can show up. So why would you be in charge of that? You don't show up. Clearly you don't show up. And Marty, I know that you provided everyone an annual calendar, right? They've had these dates. It's the 3rd Thursday of every month for the next year. They're fully capable of going on TDY and getting paid to come over here on these trips. They're not paying their way to come over here. They're getting put on orders and they're coming over here and everything's going to be paid for. And they have a year advance notice. And so just the excuses that they're using, it's so dishonest. It's so disheartening. It's so hurtful. And I just think it speaks to the institutional betrayal that military families have experienced. And I think it speaks to the overall being betrayed and left behind that the community at large has experienced at the hands of the military for far too long. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. So I think that is, I don't know, is there, oh yeah, Tara, you had.
No, I'll reserve saying anything about mediation. I have a couple questions for Kathy when we're done with the mediation discussion.
Okay, all right. Kathy stepped out for a second. Okay, so any other comments about mediation? We'll take a few more minutes. So there are some questions coming through on the Zoom online about what happens next. If the CRI members do not participate in mediation with the Navy and the EPA, what happens next? I don't know. We will see. The Navy wants to set the meeting schedule, wants to set the meeting agendas, and wants to limit what we talk about and who gets to talk about it. And we will just have to see what happens. I think there will probably be some number of current CRI members who are unwilling to accept those terms for participation. In which case, we would have to see what happens next. Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
This is the one venue where the community, and us representing them, where we have the agenda, where we have control and agency over how this runs. The Navy has their FTAC, their town halls, their little pop-up tables at malls and whatnot. This is the one event for the community that we have agency over. And to me, when I looked at those proposed ground rules, they just want to turn it into another one of their meetings that they control and that they only give their side. This is very difficult for them to handle because the community, we come up with very difficult questions and the community comes here bearing their heart and how they've been hurt. But it's such an important part of what we're doing. And I don't want to see it turn into just another FTAC or dog and pony show. So thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One last comment. I'll make it quick.
Famous words.
We're over time. My other concern is that this is just another attempt to silence the impacted community through these non-disclosure terms. And that's all.
Yeah. So.
One more thing.
Yes.
They have also said they will not take any more questions from the CRI. We just got an email until we go into mediation, which is absolutely disturbing. As a Kanaka Maoli, I will say this, that we've never had to deal with a situation like this with our water. And now, they're trying to silence us, and it's really about our water. That's number one, and it's about our future here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have been weekly sending them the updated questions that remain unanswered. And the latest email from NUI stated, I think I can read it right here, until the mediation process concludes, we will not be accepting any further RFIs. That's requests for information, AKA questions from us. So they're just shutting us down.
Yeah. So, but we've also demonstrated that we are difficult to shut down. So, you
Yes.
know, we shall persist and persevere. So, Tara, you had a question, and then Chris has a question.
We can go to Chris first.
Okay, go ahead. Chris, you wanted to raise your question?
Okay, just unmuted. I guess I couldn't hear the answer very well, but what I just wanted to go back to, what is the regulatory rules to notify utility users? What's the regulatory rules? And is there no protocol? So anybody can just start a water utility company and then they could just come up with, as long as they're notifying in some way, and then they just like call the media, then they're done. I mean, so nobody else can step in and say, no, that's not how you notify. I mean, what is the rules that a utility company, and just forget that it's the Navy, what's the rules that a utility company has to follow to notify its users, because they're an acting utility company in their
one sec,
capacity
Chris.
on the island of Oahu?
Okay, one sec. Let's see. Go ahead.
Thank you. So for regulated public water systems, there is a public notification rule.
Okay.
And that is part of the Safe Drinking Water Act. The rule ensures that consumers will know if there is a problem with their drinking water. These notices alert consumers if there is risk to public health. They also notify customers if the water does not meet drinking water standards, if the water system fails to test its water, if the system has been granted a variance, use of less costly technology, as an example, or if the system has been granted an exemption, which is more time to comply with a new regulation.
Okay.
So Tier 1 notification is anytime a situation occurs where there is the potential for human health to be immediately impacted, water suppliers have 24 hours to notify people who may drink the water about the situation.
And so the struggle that we are in now is that we're kind of we're falling through the gaps, because technically the Navy's water meets safe drinking water standards, because a lot of the things that the problems that people are experiencing with their water are not specifically regulated. TPH is not regulated. So we are in the gap. So this is So Chris, the problem that you are identifying is real. You are right. This is not right. This situation should not be happening this way. And we got to figure out ways to try to enforce that. And it's difficult because the Department of Health implementing the Safe Drinking Water Act on behalf of the federal government can only do what they are authorized to do. And in this situation, because it technically meets the drinking water standards, because we don't have a TPH standard, there's no regulatory limit for TPH, right? We've come up with these other numbers as a proxy, basically, but technically speaking, they are in compliance. But at the same time, we also know that the water is not clean and not safe. We can see it, we can smell it, we can feel it. And so this is part of what the thing that the CRI is pushing up against, is trying to figure out how to push that down. And my point in raising the DoD policy on water notifications as well is that their policy is a little more broad and says, even if it's not specific to safe drinking water regulations and complying with that. It just says if there's a contaminant and it's unknown, you have an obligation to notify. And they're not complying with that either. So, it's a struggle, and it's very disappointing that our own government is not following through on its own rules. So, yeah. All right, Tara, do you want to be the last word?
Sure.
Dun, da, da.
I recognize that we are over time, so if there isn't adequate time to answer these questions, which probably you may not even be able to, then take them back. But I do just want to put them out there into the universe. Is one, I just want to preface that before we keep talking about rebuilding trust, and yes, that's primarily with the Navy, but it's also with other institutions, as we've seen in studies recently. But before trust can be rebuilt, when trust is eroded, then what's existing in its absence, first of all, is the question that we have to ask, right? And can you immediately just go back and rebuild trust? Or is there a period, and I propose this especially with the Navy, but there's a period of time when you have to manage the distrust. And you kind of have to sit with that for a while and recognize that you have to come back from that negative space to neutral before you can rebuild. So I just want to put that out there because that applies to a lot of things, mediation and others. But with what I'm going for right now is with all the contractors that the Navy hires for the validation and for the testing and all of this, when the money is coming from the Navy, there is a distrust because it appears as a conflict of interest. Is there a way for funds to be allocated or awarded to the Department of Health instead, even if that money still comes from the Navy because it's already been awarded congressionally, right? But what if the Navy was to provide it to the state, and then the state provides that third party with the funds, and then that way there isn't the conflict of interest? I don't know.
Washes the money a little bit.
Washes the money. Let's launder it, right?
Yeah.
So that's just one thought that I had. I don't know even who to pitch it to other than you, Kathy. But it could help with that distrust management, because we all know the money is coming from Congress, but then it goes to the Navy, and that immediately puts that potential influence on appearances. And then my other question comes back to Sonia, who was here earlier, and the community science efforts. I'm curious if the Department of Health is interested in any kind of collaborative effort with communities to do a citizen science work to understand their waters in a more intimate way within their homes and within their land and within the food source areas, with crabs or with the plants, or just depending on where that's at. What is the stance there?
Yeah, I'm interested in all of that. I'm interested in getting kids into the labs. I'm interested in...
Oh, even the adults are interested in wanting to partake.
Yeah,
but
so
yes,
I'm interested in all of that. I think we need to talk about this offline.
Yeah. I figured that would have to be a further discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for expressing interest.
Can I just bring up one thing?
Yes, please do.
FTAC. FTAC was created by the state legislature. The state legislature set forth who should be the members of FTAC and who should be the chair of FTAC and all of that. So it is a creation of the state legislature.
So therefore not the Navy's meeting.
No, and the Department of Health is the chair.
So I think part of the feedback is the perception from our side is that FTAC is very much dominated by the Navy. The Navy
dictated.
Yeah, has a lot of say in terms of like what is presented and how it's presented. And well, we all really appreciate, Dr. Lau presenting questions. Ashley does a great job presenting questions. So, there are public members on the FTAC, and that is great.
Mm-hmm.
I also note that the FTAC is the one place where we can see the Board of Water Supply being able to engage directly with the Navy publicly, which is also great. But in terms of the content, the agenda, and just the way the meeting is done, where the Navy gets to basically, dominate, basically. Yeah. So
we'll take that into consideration.
Yeah. So the next meeting, the next FTAC, will be October 9th.
Convention Center?
At the Neil Blaisdell Center.
Oh. Neil Blaisdell, okay.
Yes. And if you have any suggestions for agenda, please email them to me.
Okay. Thank you. We will take
Thank
you up
you.
on that.
Yes.
October 9th.
Yes.
For the next FTAC.
Yes,
And
thank you.
I did have one thing.
Of course you
I
have
wanted to
one
thank
thing.
you guys for coming, and I think that because this show was recorded, our ability to be able to ask questions, to be able to express our concerns and give you our opinions is really, really important. It was the intent and purpose of the CRI. So I think this meeting is a good example for the Navy and even EPA. But this is the first time we've had this kind of an opportunity. So thank you for coming, and thank you for allowing us to have that time.
Great.
Thanks
for inviting us.
Thank you very much. And if the CRI continues to exist, hopefully our next meeting will be June 20th. Although that's not set in stone. We'll see. If you're interested in following the CRI and knowing when the next meeting is, there is an email list outside that you can sign up for, and you can also follow us on our website and be able to sign up for updates there. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.